Welcome to the second part of the two-parter Deep Space Nine Homefront and Paradise Lost. We have a pretty full cast of commentators today. We'll start with Shane, who definitely isn't from the Texas of Canada, but who is definitely from General Intellect Unit. How you doing, Shane?
Mm-hmm. I guess I'm from the Texas of the UK, which is Scotland for some reason.
Is that what Scotland is?
Is it?
We
Don't
have
you have
one.
like you have like a social nationalist party in the non-Nazi way? You know, that
Yeah,
seems
yeah,
very
all that kind of stuff.
un-Texas to me.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Okay, we got two Texas adjacent people. And so pivoting to Kyle, also from General Intellect Unit, and Kyle is from the Texas of Canada.
Yes, undoubtedly. We've got a McCarthyist, witch hunt on to purge all of the enemies of the oil industry here. So, feels pretty Texan to me.
Getting as far as you can from Texas now, we have Tom, who's in London, also from Alpha to Omega.
Hello.
And then, of course, we have my number one, Lexi.
Hi. I'm curiously not resting my head on your bosom in Connecticut at the moment. So there's
Check
that.
me up inside. Okay, so pivoting to episode, I wanted to open up. Okay.
What about you? Where are you, Sophia?
Oh, I'm not important. Don't worry about it. No, I'm from Arizona, just outside of the Phoenix metropolitan area.
All right.
And I do Trans Revolution, and I'm a contributor to the From Alpha to Omega reading series.
Okay. Now that we've all introduced ourselves to people that know us.
Hi, everybody who knows us already. So let's kind of go over the recap real quick. So there was a bomb planted by a shapeshifter, and we're going to put spoil warnings in the final recording, by the way. But if you're listening live, spoiler warning. So shapeshifter plants a bomb in the diplomatic conference on Earth. First terrorist attack on Earth in over a century. They convince the Federation president, Jarish Inyo, to adopt some security measures, but not all the security measures that Admiral Layton wanted. And then the power goes out, and then that's when it cuts to that's where it hangs the cliffhanger for the last part. So my question from y'all, and we're going to delete this in the editing if it was talked about last time, but the idea of so at the end of the first part, Odo was talking about how if they don't do something, the people are going to the people are afraid, right? The Federation citizens on Earth are afraid. And if they don't do something to show that they're not alone, they might act in that fear. And basically, Odo's more or less saying that they're going to start rioting and looting if you don't have security officers on every street corner. And I think we did touch on this, but I wanted to develop this a little bit.
Right.
We have a citizenry that's alienated from their ability to defend themselves. And Odo uses this fear to convince the president to to go into martial law. Now, what do we think about the idea of would it be possible in this universe for, instead of Starfleet as a body of armed men over and above the citizenry, if we had I don't know, a workers' militia or a citizens' militia of Starfleet personnel or people who just can use phasers, right? They're not going to be as well trained, obviously, but if you have Jem'Hadar facing the entire population of the Federation, they're going to have a hard time conquering the Earth, right? What do y'all think about this?
This sort of dovetails into the conversation we were having on From Alpha to Omega, finishing the McNair reading series. It's a question about how to have a worldwide democratic republic or a worldwide democracy, as close as you can have it. I mean, I want to see that version of Star Trek, of course. But and yeah, I mean, could they resist a changeling threat that way? Of course they could. I mean, you think about the armed resistance from like when there's some kind of occupying power and you have the whole populace up in guerrilla war, like, that shit can work. So yeah, that seems I don't know, that'd be cool. But that's not what you get in Star Trek, strangely. Or maybe not so strangely, because we've never seen anything like a worldwide democratic republic.
Go ahead.
It is interesting that like it's assumed that utopia looks like universal, or I guess like universal civilian disarmament, right? For Star Trek.
Yeah, very interesting.
Mm.
I think this is like this episode for me was one of those things that really highlighted just how kind of like this utopia is basically it's kind of like an Obama thing of like it's exactly the same as the present except it's a bit nicer. The model of the state here is still that kind of like platonic republic sort of thing of like the mass of citizens as a kind of inert inactive base matter, which is then formed by the kind of like higher operations of the state, right? And that even the notion that when the lights go out, people are just going to start fucking killing each other. It's like in this thing, it forbids the concept of like, I don't know, a kind of recursively self-organizing like society that's able to adapt itself to new situations. All of that is ruled out, and what you have is the alienation of like contemporary pseudo democracies. These things that we're accustomed to, but like with phasers. Is the way that the utopian sort of vision plays out, right? It's identical to the alienation we know. It's just kind of ramped up a little bit. It's pretty interesting.
It should be noted that Odo, and again, spoiler alert, right? Odo is a changeling. He's from the Dominion, or like where he was basically like just shot out by the Dominion as like a changeling scout. Like when he was a baby before he had like any real like consciousness, just to go like kind of basically to like grow up and then come back home and to like report, I guess I don't have the full story here, but the point is Odo is okay, yeah. But Odo is paranoid. Like Odo is one of the people that the Federation will be facing. Like, I don't know, not so much. Anyway, try this. You do it, Sophia. You know what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah, totally.
Odo doesn't have the values of the Federation.
He doesn't, but he allies himself. Okay, so like, I mean, your version of the story was actually basically correct. Like, he was shot out as a baby. He was found by a Bajoran scientist while still under Cardassian rule, and he kind of got a sense of consciousness of himself as a sentient being and of the world around him under Cardassian rule. But he was retained as the constable on Deep Space Nine after the Federation took it over, because he had such a good reputation of being fair. Like, he was the constable on Tarak Nor, which is Deep Space Nine under Cardassian rule. And he was a good constable because he didn't just, both Bajorans and Cardassians could come to him. He didn't just like follow Cardassian rules. He was trying to be fair. And Gul Dukat, the Cardassian leader, was trying to position himself as like the kind Hitler, basically. And so when Odo found out that the changelings, his people, which he has never met up until that point, when he found out that they were the ones in charge of the Dominion, and their interactions with the Dominion up until that point have been really bad and violent, he was devastated. And instead of basically snitching on the Federation and telling them what everything was about, he went back with the Federation and turned his back on his people. And so that's a constant theme with Odo's character after that moment, basically.
Yeah, but what I guess I'm trying to say is that, Odo was the constable of the fascist version of Deep Space Nine under the Cardassians. And every so often in the show, we'll be like, oh, it wasn't like this on Turok Nor. God, we really made the trains run on time. We should establish some curfews. Like, you know, he's not like the voice of the Federation necessarily. He's the voice of justice with a capital J.
Yeah, he's definitely got an authoritarian personality, as I think we said in the last episode.
So that's like the only thing I'd say to that.
Is the Federation then like? Sorry, I was going to say something about like, are we looking towards some more kind of a Switzerland communism?
Yeah, oh, you're back. Yeah, so I think that was kind of what was on the table, is like, what's the alternative here? Is, you know, citizens who are able to take their own initiative in defending the planet, as opposed to just being, you know, passive and afraid.
Yeah, otherwise you have this like constant. I mean, I think Shane, you made a reference to the book by Ursula Le Guin called The Dispossessed, right? And there's like the constant threat of the state, you know, possibly reasserting itself in this way. And this is maybe like the, I don't know, 1990s liberal version of it, where, you know, you already have the state, but, you know, like it could become a military dictatorship at any time. Like you have the state and you have the military. I guess this is a recap of what we were saying last time.
Mm-hmm. And it does kind of like feel like it does feel like, you know, when you watch like Discovery and the way that they like approach like the virtues of Starfleet, it's almost indistinguishable from sort of like the rhetoric of like Republican martial virtue that is used to like promote the U.S. military. It's like there's a very thin line there that you could draw to make a distinction. Feels like, yeah,
In
like
blue line.
you know, you get a lot of talk about Starfleet and almost no talk about the Federation. You know.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we decided to do this episode, this two-parter next, to give Shane and Puya a sense of what life is like for civilians and what the civilian government is like. And it's basically like, I don't know, I had some notes on this for when we talked to the president again in this episode, but it just seems like the United States, but with post-scarcity, and instead of different states, it's like a more, how do I say? Because like it makes each planet to be basically like a nation state, more or less, in a modern context. But then the Federation unites all these nation states under a federation. So, it's hard to put my finger on exactly what this is. I would love to get like a Star Trek West Wing show. Actually, I think that'd be fascinating.
You have like Jaresh and Yo giving stirring speeches about how he doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be a lot better than the real West Wing. That shit's overrated, but
it's the only way I'd stand for attention at the West Wing, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing that's really brought up for me was like, what kind of accountability or like kind of power do any of these citizens have over kind of any of this? Like, because it's again like this theme of them being so disempowered that they're just essentially cattle, right? Like that they need to be herded in this way. But like, if they barely have any sort of say in how their own planet is run, like what say do they have in the Federation? Probably very little, right? So it's very interesting that you have this post-scarcity thing, which is rather pleasant to look at, but then it's also like, oh, you know, all the alienation and disenfranchisement that we know now is just kind of, that's the thing that's accelerated, right? Like it doesn't seem as if liberty is accelerated to the speed of light. It's kind of just like, oh, here's bourgeois democracy, except somehow kind of even more alienating, because your kind of like rulers or whatever are like many light years away instead of being many hundreds of kilometers away, you know.
I guess the social being underneath, seems to be fairly liberatory, and yeah, it seems rather like alienated in the sense of you didn't see Grandpa Cisco doing working out like his like sortition assignment or like thinking about the big issues. He just wanted to fucking make some gumbo or tell his nephew to make some gumbo or his grandson.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of interesting how I think maybe what I'm my sort of critique, what I'm getting at is more like kind of along the lines of the imagination of the writers, that it's quite it's liberated in many ways, but then there's still this way in which we can't escape. Because like San Francisco just looks like fucking San Francisco, except it's like cleaner, basically, in this thing, and that's kind of the horizon of the imaginary for the supposedly communist future, right?
Yeah.
I do kind of want to push back a little bit, because I think the one thing that definitely makes it worse than modern American society, the one thing that's slightly worse about it is the fact that you can't replicate guns, right?
Okay, cool.
I mean, I stand by that. Like, if
I hear you. I hear that.
What about 3D printer guns?
Well, that's the thing. That's what Sophia's saying. You can go to a 3D printer and print out a gun. Like
in Star Trek, you can't replicate a phaser at all. Like, you have to be in Starfleet to replicate phasers, and I think that's highly problematic. And I think, other than that, like, it's not so much that the leaders are hundreds of light years away. The military, not all of it, but a lot of the military will be hundreds of light years away, because it's more about exploration. But Jerish Inyo is in Paris. I think it's Paris, because you see the Eiffel Tower in the background.
Paris. Yeah.
It's Paris, and it's less that like the leaders are potentially unaccountable. Is that it's just not really touched on at all. But I think the episode works if you imagine that they figured out, what we've been trying to figure out with the perfect world democratic republic. Oh, except you still have the military shit. Like, and so like, if everything's super democratic and awesome, except that you still have this big, exploration military thing that could turn into it could potentially seize hold of your perfect interplanetary government. Like, I think that's what we're supposed to be projecting here. Because in the mid-90s, like, I mean, I think Deep Space Nine is normally very perceptive about this, but it's more because they're dealing on like the frontier that they can get away with it. But Deep Space Nine resonated with a lot of the sort of the sense that like things were much more complex than the Cold War. That the thing that we're loyal to is perhaps morally ambiguous. I can think of the conflicts that like the United States would be embroiled in, or the international situations that were happening that the liberal institutionalists were trying to figure out at the time. I'm thinking like in the mid 90s, you have like the ethnic conflict in post Yugoslavia that like kind of really like depressed the world community about their institutions. That like, what can we do in the face of this? And so like having this view of Earth in Star Trek at this time seems out of the character of DS9, for what it's known for. What it's known for is that sort of resonance. It's I don't want to say it's dystopian, you know what I mean? Because it's not. It's a kind of like the flip side of utopia, basically.
I think we should pivot into the next scene, because we are approaching the 20-minute mark.
Yeah. Yes, a loaded question.
Yeah, there's a lot to chew on in this episode, and I think the one thing I'll say to respond to Lexi before we pivot is I think the themes of Deep Space Nine, like kind of questioning utopia, but still saying it's ultimately good, even if there's these negative aspects to it, or if it's not really utopia, but as good as you could get. I think that theme holds here, right? Because the whole idea of post-scarcity and economic liberty and no money and all these nice things, people developing themselves instead of doing things for profit. That's all well and good, but it has kind of made a civilian population that is somewhat complacent and soft. This kind of falls in line with themes of what we were talking of a different Deep Space Nine episode we'll probably cover at some point. But it's a problem, right? I still think that if the best we could do is fully animated gay space Lassalleanism, then I'm down with that. Like, it's a lot better than what we have. I still say that. Anyway, so
Starfleet did nothing wrong.
I stand the Federation. Jerish Enyo did nothing wrong. Anyway, I really was like, I was confused when I was writing notes last night. The first scene of part 2 is immediately Sisko's questioning everything that's been going on, and it immediately pivots into conspiracy, which to me is weird. Like, Sisko starting to think that the like power outage and everything that's been going on is part of like a coup. That should be the cliffhanger, I thought. And I was like, is it the cliffhanger? So I watched like the end of the first part, and it isn't. The cliffhanger is a power outage. And all through the last episode, Sisko was on board with everything that Admiral Layton was spitting, you know? It was actually Odo who ended up convincing the president both times to increase security measures. And so that was like really fascinating and surprising to me.
I guess there's just the thread about what is it, Red Squad that runs.
You mean
through
Red Guard
this,
Austin?
right? What's that?
You mean
No.
Red Guard Austin?
That's not Red Guard's Austin. Red Squad is the best of the brightest of Starfleet. That is, I don't think that we could say that.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
not the smallest. But not the smallest of Starfleet.
That's a good point.
Sorry, Kyle, make your point. I didn't mean to steamroll your point with a joke.
Oh yeah, no, just that's something that kind of draws the two episodes together, right? Is that it's kind of introduced already as something that's kind of like suspect in the first episode, and then the second episode, that's like the thread that like brings out the conspiracy.
Oh yeah, because in the first episode, it's just supposed to like sort of inflame one's egalitarian hopes for Starfleet Academy. It's like ah, damn, like there's this fucking prep school jocks, you know, that like run the campus on Starfleet, and that sounds kind of like it sucks. Like,
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. You're right. There is a bit of an about face between these two episodes for sure.
not that I looked this up, but I wonder if that's just because they didn't know what they were going to do when they finished the first episode, and then they're like, "But what if we did this instead?" You know, between episodes.
That'd be interesting. I never considered that. I always assume that when there's a two-parter and the two-parter, both parts are taking place on a bunch of new sets, that they kind of have a general understanding of the direction they want to go. Like, if that's the case, they would have had to have like kind of rush the brig set that we see later on, which it honestly does look kind of rushed. So it's like a hallway with like a jail cell. So that could very well be the case. But I didn't think that when I saw that. I just thought that the way they placed the cliffhanger made sense to me, but it could have been done different, and it was surprising, you know?
Yeah. Well, I guess the way it is that like the lights go out and you think the changelings are coming, basically.
Here, it's not just changelings, but like a whole like Dominion fleet, Hadar warships and changelings like sabotaging shit on the ground, right?
Yeah.
That kind of leads to the next scene where Grandpa Sisko is, opening up shop, and Jake's like all confused, like, "Why are you opening up shop?" And he says, "Have you seen any Dominion fleet?" Right? So, and I think it's been established in this scene also that it's been 4 days since the power outage, and I think they got power back. And there's still troops roaming the streets, and nobody's out on the streets, and there has been no attack yet. So that part is weird.
I love how in this whole thing, like the troops in the streets are the same 3 yellow shirts just seen from the window. it's wonderful.
They've got their beat.
There's no more than 3. Like, yeah, like the way that the episode's written, you'd think that there were like, I don't know, parade line marching down the street.
just kind of I see stuff like that and I'm like, okay, that's like budget limits of the show. They can only have so much extras and new sets and stuff. So I headcanon it that there's like Paris outside of Jerish, Inyo's office, all the different continents, all the countries, all the cities. There's like yellow shirts everywhere. The thing that's weird about that, though, and kind of inconsistent, is that like they begin this plan at the end of the last episode, and because the power's out, the only way they can do this is use the transporters on the Lakota, which is orbiting Earth. That would, like, if that's the only way to mobilize troops, you're kind of already fucked, TBH. Like, obviously there's no fleet yet, so if you have time to do it, then sure. But like, without transporters all across Earth and only one set of transporters orbiting, like, this is an Excelsior class ship, so I think they have like 2 or 3, maybe 4 transporter rooms. It's gonna take a long ass fucking time to like get the entirety of Earth populated with yellow shirts. So, but yeah, no, it's a nitpick.
I'm pretty sure that was only like the restriction was only during the power outage, right? Otherwise they got their own transporters.
No, that's a good point. I guess like as soon as the power was restored, they were able to use Earth's transporters, and it was probably a lot faster. But I guess I'm saying is that like if you have a limited time, assuming there was a Dominion fleet, and that's all you had to like get Earth secure, you'd be kind of boned, you know?
Yeah, and that does add to the stakes, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So we pivot to this sketch bullion admiral who kind of thinks that Cisco, this is like bad OPSEC. So he kind of thinks Cisco's in on the conspiracy. He doesn't come out and say it, but he gives more information than he should. And he looks like he's the admiral in charge of Starfleet Academy. And Cisco asks him about the transporter record for Red Squad, Red Guard Austin, and he
Red Squad Austin.
Red Squad Austin. He, he's being asked about like why did they like leave right during the disaster and then come back only to be mobilized again? That doesn't make any sense. And the Bolian's all like, "Oh, is this a secure line? Let me like let you in on some shit." And basically it says like, "Hey, could you delete that record? That's not supposed to be there. Thanks. Bye." And I don't know. I just kept thinking like, what is the canonical explanation? Was Red Guard too busy leaving pig heads in people's quarters to like fuck with them? Like,
Yep. I also think it's kind of amazing that like the guy is just like, "Oh, is this a secure line?" And he was like, "Yeah." And like Odo was just standing there like off camera, just looking at the screen. It's amazing.
Well,
You didn't ask about who was in the room.
What makes that even funnier is that Odo could have just become like a potted plant or like a table, and instead he's just like chilling, like smoking a cigarette off to the side, like just not even bothering.
Yeah, I mean, so they have every reason to believe that Cisco is going to be loyal to Captain Layton, right? Or I'm sorry, to Admiral Layton, because Cisco was Layton's XO, when they were on what were they on? I forget which ship they were on exactly.
Okinawa.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. On the Okinawa. And so like nobody suspects that Cisco is going to be like, "What the fuck are you doing, man?" And apparently Layton holds Cisco in extremely high regard, and Cisco has this reputation as being the man on the front lines of the changeling threat, So I think nobody expects this from Cisco, and that's why when Cisco contacts the guy, it's like, "Oh shit, here, hold on. Listen, I know you love this conspiracy, Cisco, because you love Layton, right? Like your personal loyalties will override all that potential objections that you might have."
And that's pretty much the entire episode, right? Is the question? That's the question? Like, will Cisco go along with his personal loyalties, or will he do his duty to the Federation?
I think this show knows that Star Trek fans, Cisco's definitely, to set up Cisco's character a teensy bit, Cisco's definitely not Picard. He is not the golden boy, head of like flagship of the fleet. He's not like the rule follower, the goody two shoe, like he gets his hands dirty, right? And that's like one of the ways that Deep Space Nine kind of deconstructs TNG. But even with all that said, I never questioned for a moment watching this episode the first time or the subsequent times. It was never a question of, is Sisko going to support the conspiracy? I don't think Star Trek would do that. Maybe newer Star Trek, but even then I doubt it, right? Like
your main character wouldn't do that.
Right. Main character wouldn't do that. And also, like, regardless of how close Sisko was to Leighton, or is to Leighton, they seem pretty friendly in the last episode. It's still bad OPSEC to just assume someone is in on your conspiracy without knowing for sure. I mean, that I don't know how that admiral got as far as he did, like making such an obvious blunder.
Like, does it say something about the conspiracy that like everyone's flapping their gums and like presuming that everyone's going along with it, and then like I think for me the show telegraphed pretty early that Sisko wasn't going to go along with it, but like it was very interesting him navigating these waters where seemingly everyone except for he and Odo were prepping for this thing.
It's like a Stalin situation, you know, like Stalin cultivated personal loyalties and, you know, relied on those very heavily when it came to making his moves.
Yeah, that's true.
So the question is posed, is Admiral Leighton the Stalin of Star Trek?
I mean, we did say that it went for mustache time last episode, so I think we've already made that statement. I think Stalin would have probably been better at his conspiracy. But,
yeah, like
you know,
definitely.
Nobody got like killed, so I don't think so.
No, yeah, there were no assassinations, no firing squads, no show trials, but you know, I could see Leighton going in that direction eventually. Just he gets stopped pretty early in the process.
Yeah, exactly. That process is cut off before it can begin. The only like real casualties are basically on the Lakota and a couple people on the Defiant. And you know, whoever didn't have backup power during the outage.
Oh yeah, think about that. Like all the people, I guess, I mean, hopefully medicine's so advanced that like people won't be on life support as often, but
and even so, if they're on life support, they have some kind of solar array or some shit. I don't know.
Right.
Like solar battery life support. Hey.
So anyway, it throws the theme after the scene, and Odo's like, "Oh, that certainly raised more questions than it answered." God, it feels so weird talking like that. Anywho,
It hits a cold open.
Yep, that's the end of the cold open. So we're making good on time. 33 minutes.
Phenomenal progress. Yeah.
So we go back to Sisko's, and is this the scene?
Yeah, this is when Grandpa Joe's like, good old blood screening. Nothing wrong with little blood screening. Like, what's, Liberty? Blood screenings are fine. Like, I don't have a problem with this.
Yeah, I like how, like, he sees how grumpy Captain Sisko is about all this, and Grandpa Sisko's like, now that I'm cooperating, you're still not satisfied? And it's just like, oh my God.
No,
fucking Grandpa.
That's pretty much a conversation. Like that's a real conversation I've seen. I mean, I don't know about like blood screenings, but it's basically like, wait a minute, you were when I was against this, you were unhappy. Now that I'm for it, you're unhappy. What the fuck's the matter with you? I don't know. Like I know Tom has a problem with a lot of the acting on the Sisko clan, but I find these interactions pretty like not just endearing, but like, if you have a real shit-kicking like family, this is the kind of interaction you'll get.
Lived in and believable to me. I don't know if Tom wants to respond, but
I just think that the decor in the restaurant is so bad that can't be the possible communist future. They've got
it is grotesque.
Really dirty green windows, They have pink, like tablecloths with crummy looking flower pots. You know, tell me, this is dystopian Stalinist Russia future.
No, this is New Orleans. This is listen. If you have a problem with the protected Louisiana national culture, you're gonna have to take it up with the authorities. Okay.
Yeah, this is like artisanal, like old school. It's not Creole. What is it? It's it's Creole, not Cajun. It's artisanal Creole cuisine from back in the good old days. It's not, they're not replicating shit. It's not like, it doesn't look like an IKEA or like an Apple store. Like,
it doesn't look like an Apple store. It's probably my prime complaint with it. So.
It looks like it looks like it's made from cardboard in a cheap set, and it's about to fall over. And they just took it out of an old 1970s Western and just painted it up. That's what it looks like.
Well, there's a good reason for that, Tom, because it's very likely how that was put together. Like,
I like the set.
Yeah, I like the set too. But that is basically how Star Trek gets a lot of its a lot of their costumes, at least. I don't know about sets. They probably built the set.
It just feels very 90s to me. That's all. Like those colors and like the wallpaper and stuff. Like, I mean, I've been in those restaurants before.
Yeah. Yeah. I really think Sisko gives Bob Saget a run for the best TV dad from the 90s. I really do.
Oh my god, I love Sisko. He's the platonic form of non-toxic masculinity, as far as I'm concerned.
I could think of some episodes where he does some things that I think might qualify as toxic, like spoiler alert, poisoning an atmosphere. That's kind of toxic. Literally.
Which one is he? When does he do that?
So this is a bit later. It's a bit later on in season 5. That's all I'll say. I probably shouldn't drop things from season 5. We only have a spoiler alert for season 4.
You should add that to our list, though, babe, for sure.
I will definitely add, because that one I was like, oh my god, what?
Okay.
This guy is not Picard.
He's not Picard, no. With the exception of poisoning the atmosphere, he's the platonic. He's still a man at the end of the day. Sorry to our men in the panel and in the audience, but
love to poison an atmosphere.
That's
Every
a very
day I get up
masculine
and I
thing.
think, man,
just
time to poison some atmosphere. And I go turn on my 4x4 truck and get to work.
Oh, wow. At first I thought you were joking, but now it seems more that's kind of real.
Are you kidding? I couldn't afford a car. What are you talking about?
Is that what you do for fun in the Texas of Canada? Poison atmosphere?
Unironically, yes. That is what
right.
people do for fun in the Texas of Canada.
No, that's kind of what I was saying. I mean,
poison the atmosphere.
It's more of a byproduct, but I'm sure if it's like brought to their attention, they'll be like, "Well, good." Like basically.
Oh, definitely. Like, oh yeah, you say I burned a lot of diesel? Hell yeah, I am.
Yeah.
You know who my hero is? Captain Sisko. That's right.
No, don't compare my precious Sisko to those people.
Those rugged Alberta cowboys, on wrestling down a tractor trailer and talking about Deep Space Nine. Yeah, you know how it goes.
Y'all are making me sad.
I mean, I'm just making this up.
Don't worry, no, nobody is a DS9 stan in the 4x4 truck community, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's those Venn diagrams are basically circles.
Listen, Sisko did nothing wrong. He's a good Christian who did nothing wrong.
Right.
It's ironic that I say that because I'm actually kind of a Maquis stan, so I'm a bit of a dialectical boo right now, but whatever.
All right. I say.
We'll address that when we get to that episode. Anywho, Quark comes up, and I love how accommodating Grandpa Sisko is, and he's like, "I'll go get some tube grubs."
Oh, you mean Nog?
Nog, sorry, not Quark.
Yeah, I was like, Quark. What the fuck is Quark doing here?
That'd be
Alright,
awesome.
So
But no.
little cadet Nog.
Little Boo.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's Cisco's grilling him about Redguard Austin. And Nog's like, I can't tell you any names of the people, and Cisco totally just like chews his ass out in like total military style. He's like, I think you're confusing this for a request, cadet. I want a name. I want it now.
Oh yeah.
Fucking
He turns
so
on a
good.
dime. This scene is great, especially the first time you see it, because Nog's like, "Oh, cool, we had dinner before. Yeah, I'm just chilling with my friend's dad." And then he just, not for long. That the tone of voice, like the way that Cisco turns, he has that quiet reservedness, and then he booms.
You know what's really great about this episode too in general? Because you've seen this a couple times, we'll see it again, I think even in the next scene, but normally in Star Trek you have a captain and like the bridge officers. Or in Deep Space Nine you have like the captain and the top tier officers, and that's the main people you see interacting. And it's very rare you get like captain interacting with like a cadet, and it's fun to see them go full like military style, like that's a fucking order, you need to do it now kind of style on them. Like they don't talk to their bridge officers that way. And Starfleet kind of has a culture, which kind of we'll discuss towards the end of the episode too, but like there's kind of a culture in Starfleet where like you can question your superior officers to a point, right? Like, and you see that a lot in TNG. Well, Picard will like ask, the bridge crew for their opinion, and he ultimately will go the way he thinks is best, but he wants them to challenge his perspective so that he can be held accountable more or less, and that he can consider all options. And I really like that. Like it still isn't like full on military, but it is definitely a special body of armed men.
That's Picard's style, though. Like
I feel like we got that in every. I feel like that's like a cultural thing in Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen a Star Trek captain, and maybe I know there's one captain maybe who's more.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking of Captain Jellicoe.
Yes,
who you'll see later on in the Next Generation.
But he seems like an outlier. Like he seems like Cisco has that kind of relationship with his ops crew. Janeway has that kind of relationship. Georgiou has that kind of relationship. Captain Pike. I don't know enough about Kirk, but it seems like it's pretty standard for maybe what's his face from the first season of Discovery.
Lorca.
Yeah,
even he though, he like asks people for their opinions, and he's like, closet space fascist.
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
but they do explicitly point out in the second season of Discovery that he didn't do that as much as Pike.
Oh yeah,
he didn't do it as much as Pike, but Pike is like the Picard of that era. Like,
yeah,
well, I think those are the figures that we're getting, because the rest, like a lot of the other captains. I mean, where do these admirals come from? Okay, so like you're telling me that everyone in Starfleet, they're just these like democratic military figures that want to hear out everybody and give their say. And then as soon as they become admirals, they all just become a bunch of corrupt, like, space worms, basically. Like,
it's so hard to believe. Like once you're at the top tier of the pecking order, it seems pretty reasonable to me to like lose that democratic spirit.
Look, we've all heard about Section 31, but have you heard about Sections 1 through 29?
Yeah, don't even get me started on Section 30.
Yeah, I was about to say, what about Section 30?
Well, we don't talk about Section 30.
We don't talk about Section 30. That's where all the admirals come from.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe the admiralty, maybe there is like a culture of, accepting democratic captains on in Starfleet, but they just don't make it to the admiralty. Like what you need is a worm, some kind of space worm that crawled into your head. That's what you need to get into the admiralty.
Like, yeah, you want to talk about conspiracy? That is literally conspiracy.
That's
Anyway.
just my headcanon for most of the admirals anyway.
That they're all space worms, that they never really got rid of that conspiracy. I mean, I guess that
It's
makes
a
sense.
feeling.
Like,
It's just a feeling.
well, even Picard, like the golden boy, the goody two-shoe, the one who follows the rules, he butts heads with animals all the fucking time. They seem like actual assholes.
Yeah, it seems like, you know, it's in desperate need of cultural revolution, comrade. Like, you know.
I guess we have a...
Steady.
You're scaring Tom. Don't scare Tom.
Yeah. No, but we read you know, Shaft Blast's critique of McNair, and in that he, you know, he pointed to the purges and the Cultural Revolution. I'm talking about Cockshot, in case you didn't know. Talking about the purges and the Cultural Revolution as, you know, class struggle and socialism. You know what I mean? And so Picard taking it to the bureaucratic admiralty. You know, like it ain't the purges. Maybe it ain't the Cultural Revolution, but it's you know, it's the lower ranks of the bureaucracy. You know, not even the lower. It's like one of the highest ranks of the bureaucracy, looking at the top and being like, "You gone soft on our values." Like, you know, you're getting too damn comfortable.
It's that classic Xi Jinping thought.
Oh my God, no.
Corruption.
No.
Hey,
Don't soil the Federation and Starfleet with this revisionism.
yeah. Well, we can't all be Red Guards, Sophia.
That's right. You can't. I am the true Stan. Oh my God. As a mild digression, real quick, that Shaft Blaster joke was so popular that even though I wasn't on that episode of From Alpha to Omega, somebody messaged me about it and was like, that joke was hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm not even joking.
Yeah, I believe it.
Anyway. So he chews out Nog, and then Cisco pivots into trying out Cadet Shepard. And this seems so fucking fun.
It's so much fun.
Cadet Shepard is just like fucking like square-jawed Chad coming in, and Cisco just like spins his chair around and is like, Cadet Shepard, third-year student, rank blah 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 blah, and just like rolls out.
The number 50301, and he like spins his chair around while saying the number and like gives him this like evil eye. It's like, oh my God, that is a scary room to walk into. Like, yeah, that's my social security number, sir. You know, like, how did you know?
I love this scene. It's so good. Like Cisco, what Avery Brooks is doing here too, actually, is like he's kind of meta acting, right? Because like Captain Cisco is acting like he knows all about like what Redguard did and understands like he's like the higher officer who knows like what all that was about. So he's pretending that, and then he's trying out Cadet Shepard, who's used to being a goody two-shoe himself. He's used to being the golden boy cadet. And so when Cisco's like, you did some real sloppy work, like, of course the golden boy is going to spill the beans, you know?
Yeah, he's too proud.
He's too proud. He's like, no, I did it right. And this is how I sabotaged the entire power grid for all of Earth. And this is like another way where like Admiral Layton's OPSEC or the OPSEC for this whole conspiracy seems like sketch or like not well thought out, right? Like, I mean, why would you use cadets?
Well, I mean, like if he was more like Stalin, these cadets would have just been shot after the operation, right? And
yes,
that would have been the OPSEC, but clearly he's not at that level.
Yeah. And so absent that, I guess, you know, I mean, look, Starfleet isn't known for its security, all right? We've gotten a little lax over the millennia of utopia, as it turns out. Like, this happens constantly, you know, on the Next Generation, like, Worf constantly letting it slip. Even on Voyager, where they're just stranded out in the middle of fucking nowhere. You know, Tuvok constantly letting shit slip. Seems pretty hard. Odo does seem to be probably the most competent security on any Star Trek show.
Even Starfleet. And even he
He's
is
not in
constantly letting
Starfleet.
shit slip.
He's not in Starfleet, yeah.
So
Yeah.
without Odo, this would have slipped past them, right? This whole conspiracy would have just gotten right under them.
Yeah, right? Because
Yeah.
Odo peaks the conversation. He picks that conversation with Cisco. It's like, what were they doing? What's that about?
What's interesting about all of this is that this feels like a Cisco two-parter or Cisco episodes, but really they're kind of Odo episodes. Odo is the mover. Odo is the one who convinced the president to start the security measures in the first place. Odo is the one who convinces the president to institute martial law. Odo's the one to bring it to Cisco's attention that maybe this is a conspiracy afoot. Like, Odo is like the mover, the prime mover of this two-parter.
Which is interesting because, like, Leighton has this kind of paranoid thing of like, oh, there's this massive threat out there, we have to take it seriously. Almost nobody else does, except for Odo, who does actually know what they're up against, but they end up in two different places, right? Like, they're both taking the problem seriously, just in very different ways.
Oh, that's really interesting. We have two different authoritarians here. Like, huh.
Or, I mean, just Odo is the right kind of paranoid, right?
Yeah. No, he knows how changelings use paranoia against the people that they want to invade. Like, that's the crucial piece of information that, I don't know, it's maybe not an informational failure. Maybe Leighton read that in Starfleet Academy, textbook on, how to be a commanding officer, but started having, images of banners of, Zevran Cochrane, Picard, and himself being marched through the streets. So he kind of maybe let that one slip. Whereas Odo isn't as tempted by that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think it definitely also plays to that idea that just Odo knows his own kind better than Leighton ever could.
Yeah. All right, let's see. What was the next scene from there? After Cadet Chad spills the beans.
Was it with they were talking to the president, and they were starting to wonder, are there like Dominion involved higher up in the chain, or like should the captain pursue this this thing, like, and the notion that like this accusation will stir the hornet's nest, right? So there's this decision point of like, do you pursue this and potentially lose your career over it if you turn out to be wrong or whatever?
There's
or
also,
lose your head if the Dominion are involved higher up,
Right.
Well, there's also the conversation between Cisco and Odo where like Cisco's saying that it's hard for him personally to turn against this conspiracy because he has like personal loyalties to the people involved because he served with them on the same ship.
These aren't evil people, Odo. These are the people I've worked with. They're my friends, people I respect. How can I turn against them?
Yeah, he seems really... I mean, he does a good job of showing how stressful this would be. And even with all of his training as a captain and being on the frontier of like the Dominion threat and trying to get Bajor into the Federation, like he's still used to juggling a lot of shit, and he still looks exhausted and emotionally drained throughout half this episode, because there's nothing that's more draining than realizing that maybe the people you once trusted were shit. And it's like something relatable, honestly. Like, I really feel that,
Totally. It becomes even more clear in the kind of the scenes where they do bring it to the president. He's kind of not buying it, right? And like, Cisco is on pretty weak footing initially, right? Like he and Odo are the only people who really think this could be a thing. They're kind of like, is this threat bigger than anybody's willing to admit? There's this huge kind of emperor's new clothes problem here of like sticking your neck out, especially against people that you consider to be friends and allies. And yeah, it's like, if he turns out to be wrong in this, it's game over completely, right?
Yeah.
But we all know we're at 55 minutes. Anywho, go ahead, Alexi.
Yeah, I just like Jirash and Yu's reaction. Federation officers committing sabotage? No fucking way, dude. Like,
Yeah.
impossible.
At this point, while we were watching this episode, my partner pointed out that all of these people, probably because they're professionally trained actors, have like extremely clear bell-like enunciation, even when they're really mad. You know, it's like, I am extremely mad at you. It's like everything is just perfectly pronounced. It's actually kind of funny.
I should take some fucking acting lessons because half of what I say is like, I'm very mumbly and I ramble.
I mean,
Podcasting
we're commie slurring on the internet. Like, what do you want? Like, you know,
fuck that.
Our words are running together.
Look, lads and ladies, I'll teach you whatever you need to know. Just hit me up.
Tom does have perfect enunciation.
I like this quote here from the president. He says, Layton wouldn't see it. Oh, no, this is Cisco. When Cisco's responding to the president's skepticism about Layton's ability to commit treason as like a loyal Federation admiral. Cisco says, Layton wouldn't see it as an act of treason. He'd probably defend it as an act of patriotism, which kind of circles back to the theme of like planets as nation states, right? Like, but it's also not just a nation state. Like, okay.
It's a world state. It's
a world. Sure, it's a world state, but like the Federation is above. It's a government over several worlds, right? Which is unique and cosmopolitan in this universe because you have the Klingon Empire, which is several planets, but it's only Klingons. You have the Cardassian Empire. Again, same thing. Dominion's the only other one that's kind of cosmopolitan, but it's like a weird caste system and anti-democratic.
No, they have a straight up caste system, like kind of slave society. Whereas, like, I don't know, well, Cardassians and Klingons, those are empires, and they have different peoples underneath them. Even though in like the classical Star Trek way is that we've found the Gozon. They live on the planet Gozon. They all speak Gozon. They believe in Gozon. You know, like. Like they kind of do take pains to flesh that stuff out a little more in the latter Next Generation in the 90s tracks. Well, I mean, DS9 really.
Riffing on the whole thing about the patriotism thing, that this scene does set up a couple of very interesting threads. One being that there does seem to be like substantial public support for the increased security. So it seems like there's a kind of gravitational attractor that's pulling towards this coup, right? That like the Layton and his lackeys think that this is necessary. It seems that like the population are kind of going along with it, and there's quite a bit of a pull there, and it's like you've only really got two people who are swimming against the tide.
Kind of circles back to the whole idea of the body of armed men and how much of a problem that is. Like, one of the things that a body of armed men can do to like a state and a society that it is normally very stabilizing, but can be destabilizing, is that if you control the body of armed men, you control the government. That's just a fact about how states work. It doesn't matter what a constitution or any piece of paper says, right? Like, if you control the guns, you control the society. And no matter how utopian and great the society seems, that's always going to be a problem. And I don't think there's ever in the history of the Federation, as far as I know, been a military coup, right? But there's always going to be that threat because people can't defend themselves. And so there's no way, if people could just defend themselves, if there was no special body of armed men, there wouldn't be that threat, right? Like, the only thing you could maybe do is like control the special body of specialists who like keep up the quantum torpedo defense system on the Earth and who, do maintenance on the ships. Like, you still have captains and engineers and medical doctors and scientists, right? But like, if people can just have their own phases and organize their own defense units, this wouldn't be a problem. That would immediately resolve this issue right here, right now. And then we wouldn't have an episode here.
I think that like there's like by the end of the episode, it's like it feels as if this is going to happen again at some point, even if this plot is foiled. That
Right.
if the structural logic of this society, with its like militarism, with its kind of like stratification and disempowerment and so on, is there is a kind of an attractor that pulls towards this kind of thing, right? The clench reflex will return eventually, and someday it'll work, right? Like this. And it's there's a slope, like you're falling into a pit, and you can fall slower, but like if you keep doing this kind of structure of a society, you're going to get into that pit eventually, right? And yeah, it just seems like Leighton's whole thing makes perfect sense within the framework of what they're working with. And you know, if it's not him, it's going to happen someday, right? There's going to be some threat. There's going to be some sort of an emergency, some sort of thing, some sort of special powers are going to be necessary, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, I think you kind of can't do this structure of a society and not have that problem.
Yeah, and like it's true that like you can't sort of like downplay the agency of powerful people too much, because like, you know, you look at the history of the 20th century, like there's some pretty major decisions that hinge just on like a few people, how they felt about something. You know, like, are we going to nuke this country or are we not going to nuke this country? That kind of thing, right? And even so, it does feel like this sort of like, oh, but the good people will defend the democracy of the Federation in the end, of course, because they're Starfleet officers and they've been trained to uphold its principles. That just seems like a very weak bulwark for democracy when it's the only thing standing in the way of martial law and martial dictatorship.
Yeah. And like you keep rolling the dice, you're going to get a 1 eventually, right?
I mean,
Yeah.
like that is, you know, how do I put this? That's pretty much classically what people thought about republics and democracies and such, that like,
Yeah.
like martial power is power. And if you have anything else, it's eventually just going to get upended by martial power, you know, whatever. Everything else is just a bunch of ideas. We've got the guns or the swords or what have you. And certainly there's a tradition, Marxist state theory, that, you know, really takes this to the nth degree. But I think kind of like the turn that like Antonio Gramsci makes, you know, towards looking at culture and hegemony and that kind of thing, like gives us a sense of when you do have a government that's backed by the military, but not totally like run by the military. I realize that in the United States, the president is technically head of the military. But like you have a lot of countries today where the power that is being wielded is not nakedly through use of force. There's a lot of ways that power is sort of enforced. Like it doesn't always come down to the baton or the gun.
Like, yeah, but the thing is that like the way this scenario is presented, the citizenry don't exhibit any of those qualities, right? Like we don't see the kinds of pull on Starfleet that would rein in its power, right? Like it's just not there. It's the personal relationships of Starfleet officers, and then the relationships like among officers, and then the relationship to the Federation executive, and that's all there is.
Yeah.
Like with that, my analogy to chance there with the dice roll is that like the coup was prevented by luck, like that Odo happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Right.
There's nothing on screen to suggest that the Earth's sort of society or the Federation has any kind of real cultural or like societal defense against this kind of threat.
Yeah. That's true.
The thing that we're like gesturing towards is the idea of civil society, right?
Well, right, and what I'm trying to think about is, there were kind of like military coups in United States history, and they were thwarted one way or the other. Is a military coup inevitable in the United States? Not that I believe the parallel between the U.S. and the Federation holds up all the time. Obviously, I don't.
It holds up in this episode, and then in this particular context, though, because Jerish Inyo in a scene makes a particular reference to being the commander-in-chief. Sisko says,
you're right.
Yeah, Sisko says, "You want proof?" in regards to like the proof that Admiral Layton has a coup and plan. Sisko says, "You want proof? Order the admiral to withdraw the troops."
Right.
And then the president says, "You think he would ignore a direct order from his commander-in-chief?"
Mm-hmm.
Like, so this as far as like the economics, night and day, right? But as far as the structures of civilian and military society, it is very U.S. It's even called the Federation. Now, I know the U.S. isn't like a traditional federation or whatever,
right.
But nonetheless, like, the government seems very like more United States than, a parliamentary system, for example.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, is it not the point here that the dictatorships arise from external pressure? So in this, you have the alien, the external force. You look at what is typically in bourgeois societies, when does it go to dictatorship? Not talking about the early revolutions into bourgeois, like Napoleon and stuff, but established bourgeois ones, say like in South America, Africa, Asia, they tend to do from external political power reasons. They don't flip. It's not like Western Europe has flipped or America has flipped. Usually it's colonial ones that flip to dictatorship.
No, that's very true. But I think in the context of this show, right, what I found very funny and strange was, in the first part, towards the end, Jerish Inyo says there hasn't been, except for the Borg incident, there hasn't been martial law in over a century. The Borg incident was really recent. Like, that's a very strange exception to make, right? And I know it was done for dramatic effect, but like, this could happen again. And especially when it comes to the Borg or the Dominion, we're talking about two powers that are two governments that are extremely powerful, extremely threatening. And with the Borg in particular, they can travel really quick. They can just show up tomorrow while all of this is going down.
Shit.
And fuck with them. Like, so, and the Federation's not small potatoes. The Federation is like one of the most powerful governments in the Alpha and the Beta quadrant, right? Like, they are well established, and yet this could happen at any point. Like, what's to prevent another Admiral Layton? So like, there is a big flaw with this kind of gay spatial Stalinism, like, the show will never go there, right? Because, then there's no show, no utopia. Or maybe it will, I don't know.
I highly anticipate that the Picard series is going to delve into the changes in the Federation and so I do wonder where it's going to point, because I feel like some of this might be borne out in a way that if I hadn't thought about this so much poring over these episodes, I might have thought it was, betraying the ideals and blah, 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 blah. But the more we're chewing on this, right, it's the more hazy and like just sort of suggestive, the sort of utopia that it is, which I didn't realize how much I was projecting onto it until we chewed on it like this.
No, for sure. I think when people complain about like Discovery, for example, and there's a lot to complain about Discovery. I don't want to open up that can of worms, but when people complain about it like not being in line with the vision, with the Roddenberry vision, right? Like, we already kind of left that vision behind in DS9. And not left it behind, but started to question it, right? Like, and I think within the logic of the show, within the logic as Roddenberry set it up, these flaws are there. It's part of it's baked into the show, right? Like, and it even really started with TNG when they introduced the Bajorans and, Ensign Ro and the Maquis. Like, TNG is arguably like the most utopian of all of the Star Trek series.
Hell yeah.
But it starts there. It starts in the most utopian, this like thread of doubt. And DS9 really pulls on it, but ultimately, like, the good guys win. And if we're looking at Star Trek as like a reflection of where, American society is at, when they come out, right? You got the utopianism of TNG in response to the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Soviet Union. Then you got kind of questioning of that in like Gen X 90s status, And then you got Space 9/11 with Enterprise. And then now with the new shows coming out, it seems like there's kind of a questioning of the validity of this society in general. Like, and it's kind of reflecting on it comes from the canon of the show in the context of Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine has already gone there, right?
Yeah.
But
right.
So that thread is present within the canon of the show, but in the context of a reflection of American society, a lot of people have a lot of doubts from all different political angles and different levels of sophistication. A lot of people have doubts in our political system. Just the amount of fucking commie podcasts out there alone is kind of indicating that, right?
Yeah. I mean,
What about
who's got time for commie podcasts,
5.5 hours of time? What about what's the latest one called? Discovery.
Yeah.
Like, in Discovery has got huge amounts of kind of teleology that's not in the other ones, and it also has loads of religious symbology. It's very, very religious to me compared to the other ones who are they're kind of all pretty atheist. I think it's nature. They've changed something radical.
Deep Space Nine and Voyager kind of tamper with that.
Voyager doesn't.
Oh, like a lot of I don't know. Even though Chakotay is more of like a skeptical kind of guy, like he incorporates his religion into things, and like the show sometimes kind of nods towards there being like a greater picture there.
And Deep Space Nine is like so many episodes of Deep Space Nine are about kind of the cultural clash of like Federation, secular culture and Bajoran spiritual beliefs that are baked into the national mythos of the national liberation effort fought against the Cardassians. Like, their religion was a big part of that. And
yeah, but it's not like they have full of Christ images like the Red Angel or whatever all over the place.
Sisko is
and
literally a Christ figure himself. Sisko is the emissary of the prophets, the main character of the show.
Yeah, but nobody believed that shit. He didn't even believe
it
himself.
Have you seen all of the whole series? I don't want to spoil too much, but
yeah, you gotta watch to the end of the show.
Yeah,
I have. I just forget
let's
it.
Not
I
go
forget.
there. Let's not go there.
We're gonna talk about it because Lexi's going through it. But rewatch the last season and tell me if you still feel the same way. Because I don't think the amount in which people think that Discovery is doing something new or diverging that much, when people really get in on that, I think they haven't watched Deep Space Nine all the way through. Now, granted, there's a lot of criticisms that are valid about Discovery, but I don't think it's diverging from 90s Trek that much, honestly. I don't think that's one of the criticisms that sticks in my mind.
It's the style for like that I think is probably most different. The new Star Wars show, The Mandalorian, has this really kind of like drawn out, artful, meditative, ponderous sort of style that I think that you could do with a Star Trek show, but that's not where they went with it. for the new tracks. So anyway.
Yeah, so just to move forward, if everybody's ready, I don't want to dwell on this too much. So let's skip ahead.
Where's O'Brien?
Oh my God, that's right. That's coming up.
Do we want the conflict between Leighton and Odo? I'm sorry, Leighton and Cisco. Cisco gets relieved.
Yeah, we should touch on this scene. So yeah, Nog comes in. Cisco's expecting Nog to bring Cadet Shepard again. Nog's like, all Red Guard gone, right? And the thing that like Admiral Leighton should have done immediately after the power was restored was send Red Guard off. Like you don't even have to do a Stalin and shoot them. Just skedaddle them away and put them in a place where they can't be contacted. Like, I don't know. I feel like Admiral Leighton's like the worst conspirator ever. Anyway.
He's a perfect Starfleet conspirator.
Yeah, he's too goody two-shoe to do it, really, to do it well. But yeah, so Admiral Leighton comes in and he's like, yeah, Red Guard, they gone. They off putting pig heads into other people's baskets. And this scene between Leighton and Cisco is really powerful. Because you really flesh out how much Leighton hoped Cisco would join in, right? And the question that comes to my mind immediately is like, did Leighton make a mistake in bringing Cisco to Earth, right? Like in this scene, we find out that Leighton had a feeling Cisco wouldn't go with all this, right? So, he talks about how he needed Cisco because nobody knows more about defending against changelings than Cisco and Odo, right? They're the two top tier guys who know how to do this. But is there really anything that they did that they couldn't get from the reports? Blood screenings? That seems obvious. Phaser sweeps? Seems obvious, right? Like what's added by their presence there? Perhaps Leighton knew Odo would be useful in convincing the president to take the first steps. And Leighton did say that he hoped Cisco would change his mind. But if you're staging a coup, you shouldn't make things harder on yourself based on a hope, right? Like, I wouldn't bring anybody to Earth who I think might oppose me if I'm staging a coup.
Yeah, totally.
And I especially wouldn't do that on a hope that they might change their mind. Like in that cost-benefit analysis of the benefit of having somebody there who's an expert on defending against changeling versus them opposing my coup, the math on that is just all fucked up.
That just wasn't a possibility in Leighton's mind. This is a loyal man to me. This guy really, this guy respects me. This guy respects my authority, respects my decisions. Like,
I'm also not convinced that Leighton was determined to do a coup from the get. Like, I think that was like a possibility he was entertaining, but like his decision to finally go ahead with the plan was probably something that happened after Cisco arrived on Earth, because they put it forward to the civilian government like, hey, you're gonna do these things, and they're like, no, we're not on board with that. And I think that's probably when he decided, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do this.
I believe that, but the issue is Jerish Inyo eventually capitulated to everything. Like, the planet is under martial law. So if Leighton changed his plan to stage a coup, what made him change his mind? Because he got everything he wanted. Did he change his mind?
He didn't get it in the beginning of the first episode. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, and not only that, but in a scene where Odo and Cisco have to convince the president of this very fact, basically, Jerish Inyo says, well, I did everything he asked. And then Odo is like, no, some of the things he asked. You didn't go as far as he wanted to. So this is kind of like slipped in under the table.
I'm not necessarily buying it. The only motivation I can see Leighton having for staging a coup is he doesn't want to end martial law. And I guess that would make sense, but it still seems too it just seems too haphazard. I wouldn't start this whole
doesn't
process.
seem well motivated enough or something.
Well motivated enough. It's not like it doesn't ruin the episode, but it's not well motivated enough, and it's not well thought out enough. Like the whole idea of pivoting to coup, right? Like I would want to stage out or plan out every single aspect of it. And maybe it's just a simple matter that if he didn't strike while the iron's hot, while there's some kind of, movement, while he's got some like loyalty and some kind of movement behind him, that maybe it would get stopped too easily. Maybe that was his motivation. And he's like, fuck it, I got to do it now. But, when you're an admiral and you have any plausible deniability, Jershinu doesn't believe he's staging a coup at all. Like, he really has to be convinced of it. And if I were Leighton, I would just kind of like wait till things cool down, right? And then try again once there's no Cisco around. Like, and yeah, like Leighton thought Cisco would be like a loyal man, but he also thought that like Cisco wouldn't go with this. He says that explicitly in this scene.
In that case, yeah, it makes sense. He shouldn't have invited him. If that's really what he thought.
Yeah, maybe believes that he would have been able to stop Cisco, like that his people would continue being loyal to him. Because like what really ends up doing it is that Cisco relays. Well, I guess we can wait till we get there. But that's with the conflict between the Lakota and the Defiant. That's the flashpoint. If that went differently, Leighton might have been able to pull it off.
Right. That's a key. That's a pivotal moment. And I hear what you're saying, Lexi, but I just keep thinking that like if I'm staging a coup, I want to control as much of the moving parts as possible. You can't control all of it, but inviting another random variable with Cisco and Odo, 2 random variables really, like it just seems counterproductive and not worth it.
I mean, are you saying that a tropey 90s sci-fi show, arch villain in a 2-parter doesn't have, hadn't thought everything through? I think you're right.
Well, I mean, we could say that about this whole podcast and just hang up our hats.
Yeah, I'm not really here to do media criticism. I don't care about media. I just care about, Star Trek and communism.
I'm not making a media criticism, though. I'm making a communist criticism of how bad this coup is.
Okay. Yeah, no.
My motivation.
We can do
communist coups.
Yeah, we can do way better coups.
I mean, look, what Italian? I don't know what the fuck you want me to say. Like,
No,
I'm just criticizing. I'm not criticizing it because of its media. I'm criticizing the politics of it.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I think it's fair to say that Leighton bungled this entire coup. Maybe he let his personal feelings overrule his better judgment. Maybe it's just sloppy writing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what's being nudged out here is, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Like the more power that Leighton accumulates, the more like he wants more power.
It kind of reminds me of like what's that bishop who in England who got into really bad trouble with the king, like way back in the day, way back in the day.
Oh God, there's a lot of bishops and a lot of kings.
Let me find this. I can't believe the British people on this podcast don't know about this.
We don't know anything.
This is.
I lived in England once.
We're just dim-witted fucking chimney sweeps, like going around coughing all the time.
Oh no! Like I watched a whole movie about this in English literature class, and like, oh, this is terrible.
I don't know, man. Kings be crazy,
I feel very bad about the.
It's okay, Kyle. Give us the rundown.
Anyway, it is so. There's this guy. I forget his name, and I'm ashamed of it. But basically, the king brought him on as a bishop because he was like, yeah, you know what? We're best buds. Like, you're gonna do everything that I want to do, right? And it actually turned out completely the opposite. And they got into a really serious political conflict, even though they had a very strong personal friendship at the beginning of the whole thing. So that just kind of is the sort of situation this reminds me of, where like, yeah, you think you know somebody, but then the circumstances change, and you end up in a completely different political situation. So that's what I was trying to bring out. Is like this kind of thing has happened in history.
Mm-hmm. I had one tiny thought on just kind of this sort of thing that like Leighton's been building up this kind of loyalty over his entire career. I think maybe this would land a little bit better if it was the culmination of a string of false flag attacks. Like the fact that it's just one. It's one event, maybe puts it on a bit shakier footing. But if this was like a string of these kind of things that were coming together, he might be able to sell his sort of angle on doing the coup a bit more convincingly.
And
who knows?
I found the person. It was Thomas Becket. Yeah.
Thomas Becket.
Yeah, Archbishop of Canterbury from 1162 until his murder in 1170 at the hands of the king's followers.
All right, nice. We got it. So Sophia will be sure to chop that up. Let's see.
One more thing I want to say before we move on to this scene. Next scene, if y'all are chill with that. I want to pose a question of like this whole monologue about loyalty and this kind of like back and forth between Leighton and Cisco, kind of like tying that to like that loyalty to a command structure. Is this kind of a useful concept in like a workers' militia, taking like a more Marxist kind of version of this, you know?
How do you mean?
Well, so like that strict command structure, like that line that Leighton gives about you know, he taught Cisco that at some point you have to just follow orders and not question it, right? Like, is that kind of mentality necessary and useful in a workers' militia, or should you always be able to question orders in like a, you know, communist libertarian communist kind of like workers' militia or whatever you want to call it?
Well, I don't have like the most knowledge about how elected military officers have worked, but I would say like it, you know, I imagine it would be kind of similar to like many other organizations where you have elected officials. It's that people would go along with it for the most part, but of course they would have the right to dissent. I feel like it would be the same, but a little bit softer, you know, a little bit more open. You do kind of have like it's election and then also recall, right? Are the rights that you're supposed to have. So yeah, you couldn't have recall if people weren't able to like dissent.
Let's if you don't mind, let's take it to like an example you find in the Paris Commune, for example. That was like a big deal in the Paris Commune, was that like, you know, officers could be elected and recalled. But what ended up happening was that the workers and the soldiers would just recall officers that didn't let them just fuck around, honest, you know. And
yeah,
there was a lot of problems with the Paris Commune, but like, if that's always going to be how it plays out, like, do you need a more structured body, more structured workers' militia than that? Or can that work if you just remove some of the other problems that were in the Paris Commune, primarily the kind of Proudhonist streak that wanted to just ignore the state, basically?
Yeah, I think like in general, it points towards the need for better like organizational forms, like at a higher level. Like I really, I mean, it won't be a surprise to anyone that's heard our show, General Intellect Unit, but like I'm a big fan of like kind of the Stafford Beer kind of model of like this systems of like balancing autonomy and cohesion against each other, and like having systems that can figure out what the appropriate degree of freedom is and what the appropriate degree of like stepping in line is. It's the kind of thing that's not really possible to grapple with if you've just got basically a traditional militaristic structure, but like plus elections or something. I think, and that's not sufficient to get you to a place where the whole body of the society is able to like jigsaw itself together in a way that is both accountable and can actually get shit done, and not just, you know, have people dicking around.
Yeah, like the old Republican critique of what happened to Rome and why the Republic died and the Empire was born had a lot to do with the professionalization of the military. And if you're familiar with like the Bolsheviks' early experiments with like, we're going to have a democratic army. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to have just a professionalized Red Army. Like, you know, these are real questions and pressures. And like, yeah, you have the problem of a breakdown of authority, but then once you professionalize the army, you know, the kind of Republican freedom that you wanted is just lost. That hopefully cybernetics can whip up some new forms. It's kind of well, I mean, really, like part of Marxism is a sort of openness to a historical figuring out of problems that before could not be figured out. That essentially, like, you know, Marxists are still grappling with like the Federalists in terms of like, you know, can we do anything better than a big old like republic with some democratic stuff in it? Like,
you also have the intermediary form, which is the U.S. military in Vietnam, where you had unelected military officials, but then you just killed the ones you didn't like. So that's another way that you can organize.
that was more the structural logic of breakdown than the logic.
Yeah, totally.
Or the logic of the mirror universe, which I'm not really trying to replicate that.
Yeah.
I mean, the mirror universe is there canonically, but other than that, it's pretty terrible.
Well, they have the Klingon line of secession, right? Like if you assassinate your superior officer, you know, you become the superior officer, but if you lose, then if you fail to kill them, then you're in trouble.
Right. 100%. Yeah, that it be that way. Welcome to the Agonizer booth. Okay, so we're at hour 30. So let's go to Chief O'Brien in the next scene.
Hey, it's Chief O'Brien. But no, what's he doing here?
Right. So yeah, Sisko's at Starfleet HQ, chilling outside in the courtyard, having a pout. And Chief O'Brien just wondered something. He's like, "Sup? It's me, Chief O'Brien. Hey." I don't know why he's Italian all of a sudden.
because he's acting
Italian, Irish. It's all the fucking same.
Oh my god.
Because he's acting slightly uncannily different, and like, I would say that Colm Meaney's performance here isn't like a subtle performance, because the way that he's behaving is maybe a bit like, you know, a villainous, but like the way that he subtly, like the changes from the way that he plays O'Brien is very subtle in a way that's uncanny, in a way that I think when I was very young, I saw this scene and it made me very uncomfortable because I realized that's not my friend. That's not my friend O'Brien. just really like it was, yeah, it's there in the dialogue, but it's also there in his performance. You know?
Yeah.
Like Colm Meaney's depiction of Chief O'Brien, you know, he would just never hold himself like that or like deliver lines like that. There's something really creepy about it that I only really got when I was younger, and then the first time that I saw it. The next few times I watched it, I'm like, okay, I could see Colm Meaney's acting a little broad here, but why don't we say what happened in the scene before I tell you about my childhood?
So yeah, so we got Chief O'Brien walking up, and Sisko's like, "How the hell did you get here so fast? The Defiant couldn't get here this quickly." And what does he say? I'm sorry. When you were talking, I just watched. I played the episode on silent and was looking at his like body movement. So yeah, so he walks up, and Cisco's like, "What the hell? How did you get here?" And he's just acting like so nonchalant. And he says, "I didn't come here on the Defiant. Tell me the truth. Do you really believe that phaser rifles will do any good against shapeshifters?" And that's how he doesn't. Uncanny is the perfect word for this performance. Because it doesn't just come out, he's there to gloat, basically. That shapeshifter, it's not O'Brien, it's a shapeshifter, right? Cisco realizes after O'Brien says, "What do you think a phaser's going to do against some shapeshifters?" It's not O'Brien, it's a changeling. And the changeling only comes here to gloat, basically. Like, there's no other motivation for them.
The changeling also drops the line that there are only, like, he asks, like, how many of us do you think are here? And he doesn't have an answer. And he's like, 4. There are only 4 of us here, and we've caused this much chaos. You know?
Yeah. The Federation is on the verge of being taken over by a military coup. And we see, I'm trying to think of how to say this. There's a lot of, in the Alpha Quadrant and the Beta Quadrant, there's a lot of political uncertainty that's very strange, right? And all that kind of over the next few seasons gets explained, right? So this is kind of hinting at some things right here. And they're trying, what this is telling us is that changelings are able to do the thing that you think changelings will do. The very reason why changelings are feared is because they can create instability in your society without you realizing it. Or you do realize it's becoming unstable, and the instability is an overreaction to the possibility of them. And they're playing 3D chess right now with the Federation because they are not doing a whole lot, right? I mean, the bombing was a pretty big deal. But they kind of did that and stepped back and did a few things to spook them. And then it all just kind of like took on a life of its own. And they're just kind of sitting back in the cut and watching the Federation destroy itself.
Well, I think that gets why this isn't just gloating. Even though the changeling walks up to him and says, "We're smarter than you. You're stupid. Your fear is going to destroy you." And basically tells him the strategy, right? Like, he's trying to make Cisco even more paranoid by having his friend walk up to him and tell him, "Oh, how's your father? Oh, you want to go play some darts and have a pint like your old friend Miles O'Brien?" Like, look, we know everything about you. We have your fucking number, all right? Like, you should be terrified of us. Like, that's the thing he's trying to do, is instill, and because Cisco is just demoted from being Starfleet security, like, and he's kind of at his bottom in the episode, like, and then here comes a fucking changeling to fuck with him. Like, he's trying to drive him over the edge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think at this scene really kind of drove home just how much the state form of the society and just the state form in general will not be able to resist this kind of fluid, kind of rhizomatic threat that it is simply incompatible with. You know, that, like, I think the state form here is structurally incapable of responding to this kind of a threat without doing its clench reflex, right? Like, and driving itself into destruction.
The changeling, what a great way of thinking about the rhizome. can take any form, you know. Mm-hmm. It's so, what makes it so powerful is that it's so fluid.
Yeah, we could write a whole critical theory paper on changelings in Star Trek. We're not going to, but we could.
I'd be surprised if nobody has until already.
I mean, if the changeling didn't, have its own like big fascist caste system that seems utterly non-rhizomatic, perhaps it would have been done already.
Yeah, totally.
Seems like that. This is a bit of a digression, but it seems like that fascist caste system came about because their fluidity and kind of rhizomatic nature was rejected. It's kind of like the canon with like
Oh,
the boundary.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, because
Yeah.
the solids, tried to get rid of them. So like, well, fuck it. We'll just be the worst. So this is like
Yeah.
Nickland rhizomes.
Oh no, fuck.
Hey.
Right, it's the rhizome to fascism pipeline.
Yeah.
Oh my
There
god.
it is. That's what changelings. Yeah, there we go. That's the rhizome to fascism pipeline. That's the fascism of the potato, as they say.
Oh my
Right,
god.
but the interesting thing here, though, is that like the answer to that threat might not be to just keep doing this state form, right? Like that.
Yes, keep clenching.
Yeah, like so it's an intrinsically. I mean, the analysis is obviously applied to the states that we're currently familiar with, that they are intrinsically unstable, right? That they are not capable of stabilizing themselves in the face of like, even throwing aside the rhizome shit, but like just like threats that are more dynamic than them, like they tend to be overwhelmed by this stuff. And so if this utopia wants to continue to be a utopia and develop into something even more utopian, there's kind of a crossroads, right? Like, do we keep doing this kind of like Obama style, like, oh, it's bourgeois democracy but cleaned up a little bit, or develop into something that can actually deal with these threats in a liberatory way, or collapse into militarized fascism, which is one of the options on the table in this episode. So what it's throwing into relief there is that like the kind of the structures of the society it's a point I keep harping on, but like the structures of the society don't seem to be sufficient to their ambition, right? Like there is an ambition to create this crazy like space communism that's like maximally liberatory, but what they've actually got, not so much,
That's all.
Mm-hmm.
I like your perspective there.
Well, I mean, you said you put the rhizome aside, but what you really just did is translate the metaphor into English. That's all it fucking is.
Scrape off all the fucking frog wizard speak. Yeah, totally.
Exactly. Like, yeah, we're talking about dynamic systems that can outflank, the regular like gun-toting butthole reflex. Like,
And
The butthole reflex and the gun-toting thing to me are kind of opposites. Like, if you want less tight butthole in response to these dynamic threats, you need more guns. Everyone needs a gun, and everyone needs to be trained. Like, so that way you don't have to. You don't have to set up martial law to keep everybody safe.
Mm-hmm.
but you can't have see, what we have here is a society of a rigid tight butthole cast, and then just utopian flapping buttholes in the breeze. You know what I mean? Like if everybody has a gun, you can't just have loose flapping buttholes in the breeze. They might be incontinent, just shit all over the place. Like you can't do that. Like
I think,
especially with guns, if everyone have guns, like maybe not everyone needs to be like the size of like a dime or something. But the point is that like you gotta like if everyone is going to be armed, it requires a certain amount of discipline on the part of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that creates a lot of questions in a liberatory society. And not even that I oppose it, but it creates a golden mean of the butthole metaphor.
Before we
There's
move
Have a
on
title of
from
the
this,
episode. Golden
before we
mean of
move
the
on from this
butthole
wonderful,
metaphor.
like
golden mean
before we move on
butthole.
from this wonderful butthole metaphor bit, I just want to kind of put it out there that like for Stafford Beer, the clench reflex was not a response to instability. The clench reflex is the instability. Like so, when a system clenches, it is in the process of collapse. Like which is counterintuitive because like the clench reflex is often sold as like this is the answer to instability.
Right,
but for Beer and his analysis, that is the symptom of instability. Like that is you're going to clench yourself to death by doing that kind of thing.
That makes so much sense.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the shoot the cat option.
Right,
or
ultimately
the-
end up shooting yourself. Right.
Add the extra rigidity to the system. Yeah.
To just also kind of address a little bit of Lexi's concerns about buttholes and guns. I just wanted to say that phrase. I don't have a response.
I mean, I understand.
Should we move to the next scene?
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on. Yeah.
Okay, hold on one
We
second.
could be talking about guns and buttholes for the next 2 hours. So We should
Together, that's
probably-
basically all we talk about. So I know that from fact.
If we're coming up on an hour 45, should we maybe sort of skip towards the climactic sort of scenes?
Yeah, we don't need to dip into Neffy Beaumont.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about Nephew Beaumont.
Okay, I like Nephi. I like that scene. It's super cute.
I listen. I love Cisco and his father. Now that Thomas dropped off the call, we can relax and just
We can
say
play the forbidden music now.
Yeah, yes, we can. We could just say how lovely their relationship is, and this is peak '90s dad. It never got better.
Yeah.
Show me better.
No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, we talked about it last episode, but yeah, a healthy Black family, nothing going on other than that. Like, it was very, very progressive for the '90s. Anywho, so we get to, this is where we'll come back into editing. So we get a scene with Odo and Cisco looking at Leighton's records, and they basically just figure out that Leighton has been moving people around and kind of getting shit ready. And they're all officers from the Okinawa. And they're kind of putting the pieces together that on the 14th, I don't know what month this is, but on the 14th, the president is going to be giving a speech. And that's when they think they're going to make their move, because all these different loyal officers are being moved around that day, basically. So he's surrounding himself with loyal people, and he's going to take over at that point. So let's skip ahead. Anybody want to say anything about that?
Yeah, that gave me the most Stalin vibes on Leighton's part. He's bringing in the mid-Carters.
Yeah.
Like, as general secretary, because that's all he was. General secretary wasn't supposed to be like a super presidential position. He was, just really in charge of, I don't know, secretary stuff. Just the general secretary. I don't know. There's always something about the rise of Stalin that's so interesting. It's like the Peter principle, jacked up to 1 million. He was just like he's just your average Joe bureaucrat. But what happens when he's given the keys to ultimate power?
Failing upwards, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So we get the next scene where Cisco is called into President Jerashinya's office. There's a bunch of yellow shirts standing around looking like Chads with their phasers.
Oh yeah.
They're definitely related to that cadet.
Oh yeah, that's
for sure.
Yeah, Lieutenant Chad Shepard with the butt chin in the background. Yeah. And I didn't notice this before, but to their right, we have a couple of like judges. I don't know what the fuck they are. They're just like old dudes with like robes just chilling. They don't say anything. That's weird.
Isn't there a guy in a trench coat?
Yeah, there's a guy in a trench coat.
He had to like get a emergency evac from the holodeck to come to this meeting, and he's like, sorry, I was in my private eye simulation.
Yeah, I was in my goth scene from the Matrix simulation.
What the fuck? Why are they there if they're not going to say anything? They look so out of place. Anyway, oh, sorry.
Like, I don't know. It's all just a fuck you, Cisco. He's been set up, gang.
Oh yeah, for sure. He comes in and he's like, "Oh, I didn't expect you to be here, Leighton." And Leighton's like, "I bet you didn't." And Benteen is ordered to get a blood sample, and the blood sample turns into some silver jello.
Yeah, we got some changeling blood.
And when I first watched this the first time, I was like, "Oh fuck, is this a changeling, Cisco?" And we get to
that would have been a crazy ass twist.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been a crazy ass twist. I wish they would have done that. It would have been more fun. But no, this is regular ass Cisco. We get the next scene in the brig.
Well, like when I saw that, I thought, "Oh shit, one of them is a changeling. How the hell did they do that? How the hell did they fake changeling blood?" Because I just felt like I trusted that this wouldn't be a changeling, Cisco. But when I saw the blood, turn, I was like, oh my God, like one of these, doctors or whatever, like whoever gives him the screening must be a changeling, because then they could produce the blood effect using their goo or something. But they never actually explained
I
how
only
that's
thought
done.
it could be one of two things. One is it was Odo played another trick, or it had been fake because there was so much talk about faking the blood tests in the episode.
Yeah. When Grandpa Joe's like, you think they can't fucking figure out a way around blood tests, you idiot? You have to go with the rhizome, son.
Throw some
theory
at Cisco.
Yeah, put some more potatoes in the gumbo.
Yeah, so we get the next scene. Bentane's not Captain Bentane's not a changeling, neither is Cisco. And Cisco asks, how the hell did you take that blood test? And Admiral Layton's like, doesn't matter. So that's the writer is looking at camera being like, don't even worry about it. Don't even think about it.
Yeah, for plot reasons, Layton explains, this is irrelevant. Let's move on.
Right. And I'm fine with that because we are also running up against the clock. So wink. So Layton's like doing a sad because one of his best friends is in jail, and Cisco's like, well, let me out, you jackass.
Yeah. Oh, maybe life will look a little better. You fucking crocodile tear crying motherfucker. Oh my God. That part is so funny.
So, and then this kind of reminded me earlier when we first brought up like Layton as Stalin. I thought to this scene, because in this scene, Layton's like, oh, I'll let you out in a couple of days after like I've already taken power. Don't even worry about it. And that's very un-Stalin, right? Like if this was Stalin, Cisco would be dead. Like phaser to the head, gone, right?
Yeah.
But
100%.
Early Stalin, like when he's like just kind of shuffling the cards and like positioning himself, I don't know if he would have just like, he didn't just come out and shoot Trotsky. Like he outmaneuvered Trotsky, for example.
Right, well, even when it came to like the top guys going through the purges, he assured them, don't worry about it. You're definitely not getting capital punishment. Bukharin, you think I'm going to shoot you? Come on, buddy. Like, spoiler alert.
Spoiler for history.
Yeah.
No,
I can't wait till Leninists find out about that. Yeah.
I
don't want to catch them up. Yeah. No. Spoiler alert.
So yeah, towards the end of the scene, it kind of like transitions and we get a cart of blood screens, and Cisco's like, hey, give me one of those blood tests. And the yellow shirt's like, fuck you, buddy. And then Odo just pops out of nowhere and it's like, it's me you should be worried about. Punches a guy and you get a good Star Trek fight.
Yeah.
Let's
he does a Vulcan neck pinch. He does a Vulcan neck pinch.
He does a Vulcan. I noticed that last night. You're totally right.
Yeah, and then like he does this classy move of letting down the vampire whose neck he just pinched, and they call her a vampire. She's going around collecting blood screenings. It's kind of there's a cute little MASH like moment of we're just on the job doing blood screenings, like.
In this scene, I like because I haven't really been keeping up with Deep Space Nine or anything. I wasn't super familiar with it. Like I'd forgotten that Odo was a changeling. So when he just did the like roomp thing and like did the change, I was like, holy shit, look at this guy. And I was like, oh no, this is normal. This is fine. The heart rate spiked for a couple of seconds there.
Oh man.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That would be also a really weird twist, though, if like a Dominion changeling let Cisco out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. As a chaos agent, yeah.
Masquerading as Odo, etc. You know.
Oh my god. Yeah. No one's ever thought about that. Like, what if a changeling makes himself look like Odo? Like, that's like the most like. It's right under your nose. It's so deviant.
Mm-hmm. I was just listening to an RPG podcast about changelings yesterday, and they were talking about this possibility. It's pretty funny.
The radical skepticism pipeline of simulations all the way down. Like,
Just changelings imitating changelings and what sort of implications that would have.
yeah, because like when I first saw this episode, like I thought, oh my god, this breaks the logic of the show. Like anyone could be a changeling at any time, which like the show plays with a little bit so far, but like not as much as I was expecting, I'd say. But yeah, like it's the changelings are like actually, especially if you're just following through Star Trek, like it's a sort of revolutionary threat for the the kind of thing that the Federation is.
Yeah, well, look at what they did to the Romulans.
Wink, wink.
You know.
Cisco's like, "Hey, did you do that thing I asked you to do, Odo?" And Odo's like, "Yeah, I did it." So let's set something up for the next scene. And Cisco, total action hero status is like, "I got some business to take care of." Cuts to Leighton in the security office that used to be Cisco's, I think, and he's talking to Captain Benteen on Google Hangouts, and Benteen's given some orders to stop. Is this where he says to stop the Defiant?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I think we skipped over this going through the episode so far, but Cisco called Kira at some point and gave Kira nondescript thing to do, and I think it's this. In this scene, we find out that Kira and the people back on Deep Space Nine were told to find somebody, and the person they found set up like some kind of technobabble relay that made the wormhole open and close, the wormhole to the Gamma Quadrant. So it looked like a Dominion fleet was coming through the wormhole with cloaked ships, but really there wasn't shit happening. And that wasn't even set up by changelings. That was set up by a Starfleet loyal to Leighton. And that was the inciting incident to get this whole two-parter set in motion, really. So the whole thing was a setup from the beginning, and they found the guy, and he's willing to confess. And with that in the bag, Cisco could totally prove that Leighton done it, and Leighton's staging a coup. But Leighton told Captain Benteen to go stop the Defiant. And so we get Cisco coming in like a badass, phaser pointed at Leighton, and he grabs Leighton's comm badge, which sometimes they don't do that in these kinds of Starfleet v Starfleet scenes where like a Starfleet is like possessed or whatever. They just kind of let them have their comm badge. I don't think it's really, really bad. So Cisco did the right thing here. And let's see.
That is actually something that they pick up on, like, is that, when Starfleet officers are inhabited by some other kind of being, sometimes for one narrative reason or another, usually so that they can't be traced, they'll put their comm badge somewhere else as a symbolic gesture.
That's true.
Although what Cisco, I like what Cisco does here. It's like, I don't know, it's like snatching the badge off an officer. You're off the force.
No, totally. It's a very big symbolic gesture, but he's holding, the admiral's holding on to his pips, which is like him still holding on to like, I can make this happen. Cisco
I might not be Starfleet no more, but I got the authority to make this shit work.
Right. And so Cisco points out the obvious, like, hey, if you stage a coup, like there are other Federation planets besides Earth, and they may not be down with a military dictatorship taking over their government, and this could probably start a civil war.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, so.
Yeah, he didn't really think that through.
Yeah.
He's really just kind of like, oh, they'll come around. It's like, they probably won't, my dude. Like, we know
The Vulcans are not gonna put up with this shit.
Not at all. They'll fight this tooth and nail. Like, the Vulcans even have their own Vulcan expeditionary force. They have their own military. Like,
yeah, it's true. They don't have like a single military. Like they have a single government, which is interesting.
It is interesting. And yeah, so like, who knows? Like, maybe the Andorians have the Andorian Expeditionary Force. I don't know.
I would
Like,
imagine so.
Mhm.
Andorians are proud, children of Endor, children of Andoria.
and the Bajorans have their own military. They're not in the Federation yet, and that's the main reason why. But, like...
Well, they might retain the Bajoran militia.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like the Bajorans, even though they're not part of the Federation yet, they could just start fighting this. Like, why wouldn't they,
Yeah, totally.
And really, like, Deep Space Nine is going to be on the opposite side of the Civil War. Like, this is like a terrible plan, and Leighton is very naive here. But he feels confident that it's all going to work out and that the Lakota is going to stop the Defiant from getting there. So we cut to the Defiant with Worf in the captain's chair, and they talk about how the Lakota is telling them to stop and prepare to be boarded and surrender, and they're like, what the fuck? This is weird. Let's just raise shields and keep going. They're not going to fire on us, surely, and they totally get fired on.
So is it important to mention that the setup for that is that Leighton is going to say that the Defiant is just all whatever replicants or fucking shapeshifters. That'll be the official line when the Defiant goes up in flames.
No, that's actually a good point. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, that's why she's going to fire on them. Like Admiral Bentine, might be loyal to Leighton, but doesn't. It's very much suggested that she's doing this because she thinks that she's fighting the changelings.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So even the loyalty that he's built up is based on a lot of lies. And, lying to your second in command. If you have to lie to your second in command, you're not on, your right-hand woman. Like, you're not in, like, good shape, I think. Like, plus, the thing I was thinking about, too, is, like, okay, what if the Defiant just surrendered? And they were like, okay, come test us. Like, you think we're changeling? I mean, they don't know why they're being told to stop.
Did they give them the option to surrender?
They said, lower your shield, stop moving, and prepare to be boarded. That was the Lakota's orders to the Defiant.
Yeah.
So, it's not as dramatic, but the Defiant could have been like, okay, like, come give us blood tests. We'll prove to you we're not shapeshifters, right? And then come hear what this guy has to say. But maybe also what all that Leighton's hoping will happen is that the Defiant can be stalled out long enough to where it won't matter.
Mm. So Worf's decision to not lower shields is a load-bearing decision in the plot, right? Like, that it all hinges on that working out.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because like one of the things, like Worf here is very, very Starfleet, which is interesting because in TNG he's always seen as kind of the outsider. Like, he's ultimately always loyal to Federation Starfleet, even though he's a Klingon. But here, Kira is more of the outsider, right? Like, so the Lakota fires on the Defiant, and they're trying to like think of all these ways to avoid a direct confrontation with the Lakota, but they're getting the shit kicked out of them, and everyone's all like, "We can't destroy this ship." Like, okay, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So there's this back and forth in their fire, and eventually, like, Worf decides that they need to fight, right? But they're trying to do the Starfleet thing where they're trying to disable each other, not kill each other. It pivots back to Sisko and Leighton, and give me 1 second. They have another conversation about loyalty, and Sisko goes into a dramatic response about, how dare you talk to me about loyalty? You ordered one of our own starships to fire on another, and you're questioning my loyalty? You're the one staging a coup.
Yeah, that whole chain of command thing is such bullshit coming from Leighton. And, like, that's what I was thinking in the back of my mind, and I was hoping Sisko would say something, and he kind of, in the first time this comes up, he kind of just sheepishly walks off. Or maybe just basically says, I don't fucking respect your authority. He just, like, refuses to engage. He doesn't do imminent critique. But here he's like, oh, loyalty, huh? Like, let's talk about loyalty, which is what I was hoping for from the first from Get.
Really good writing, like building up to that. Like at first Cisco kind of was like, well, yeah, like you're supposed to be loyal, but this is kind of fucked up, dude.
But fuck you, dude. Like, I don't care about your authority.
But then he gets here and he's like really like loses it. And I can relate. Like I could see how I'm the kind of person who's conflict adverse until my buttons have been pushed enough. And then I just kind of like get very fiery and aggressive. And I could totally relate to how Cisco kind of like, you see that snap in him in so much that he kind of like walks away from Leighton and isn't pointing a phaser at him anymore. If Leighton had acted, Cisco was kind of vulnerable.
Yeah, I was always thinking about that. Like, when, he didn't keep the phaser drawn on him. It was more for like, look, fuck you, dude. Like, it was like, I don't know if that's an acting choice or if that's like Cisco's like, what Cisco is intending to do here. That he's just really trying to demonstrate to Leighton more so than provide like direct force. I don't know. Because, Leighton could have got the jump on him when he was turning.
Right. Like, does Leighton have like a phaser, like a little key fob phaser in his desk drawer? I would if I were him.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking.
Fuck, if I were Federation, I would have a key fob. If I were Starfleet, rather, I would have a key fob on me at all times, at least, if not like more. Anyway.
If you had like a Bajoran like earring or something, could you think you could hide a key fob phaser in it?
Oh my god, that'd be so sick. I wish they would ever like develop that, but I don't think they do.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, they're slightly too big. You have to wait for the mini model, the mini S model.
Anywho, so the Bentine calls up. So before, when the Lakota starts firing on the Defiant, they comment on how the Lakota's weapon system has been upgraded, and the real O'Brien says that's way more powerful than your normal Excelsior class ship. And then Bentine calls up and it's like, hey, somebody upgraded the plating armor on the Defiant and didn't report it to operations, and so we're kind of getting our ass kicked here. And we get Leighton ordering her to use quantum torpedoes, which at this point in Star Trek canons is like the most powerful weapon. And Leighton gives the order to use quantum torpedoes to destroy the Defiant. And she was like, well, I was told to disable it. And Leighton's like, your orders are to stop the Defiant by any means necessary. And Cisco's like, those aren't changelings, Bentine, you know that. And
damn well these are not changelings. There's not a single changeling there.
He says, you will be killing 50 Starfleet officers. And you can tell, like, it's not very obvious. There's just kind of like a pregnant pause there. But you can kind of like you can almost hear Bentine gulping. She's kind of like, gulp? Like, what if I am killing 50 Starfleet officers? Like, what if Leighton's full of shit?
Dude, I never thought of it like that. What if these Starfleets are just Starfleets? Shit. Yeah, like I wonder how much of that on Bentine's part is like cover. You have cover. Your superior officer told you to do something and gave you like a flaky justification. You kind of trust him, but like, really? I don't know.
That's a good point.
It's classic, like that's like a groupthinky thing. Like all she had to do was turn it over a little bit and go, this doesn't make sense. But since she had the org support, she could have pulled the trigger.
It could be a groupthink thing, or it could just be like a purely cover thing. Like, according to official records, the ship is a ship of changelings. She knows that it's not really. But now that there's a Google Hangout log of Cisco being like, nah, those aren't changelings. You know that. Her cover's blown. But I don't think so. I think the character of Bentine is kind of subtly set up as like ultimately loyal to Starfleet and the Federation, but really believes that there is a changeling threat, which is like understandable because she saw a changeling impersonating Admiral Leighton in front of her in the last episode. Like, that's pretty freaky. And she's good close friends with Leighton, and Leighton's like kind of been a mentor to her. And so she I think she really believes in this stuff. So anyway, she gulps, and it cuts to back to the Defiant, and the tide has turned, and the Defiant is winning, but they're really fucked up. And O'Brien's like, one more phaser hit or torpedo, and they should be done. They should blow up and die. And Worf's like, that's not an option. And then Kira says, it's either us or them. And I found this really like deep cut, but also like a really interesting subversion and deconstruction of Worf as an outsider. Like, Worf is always kind of outsider status. Like, he's always kind of an outlier in the Federation. And he's always in between Federation and Klingon. But in this particular context, Kira is even more of an outsider. Everybody on the bridge of the Defiant is kind of on the same page. Like, we shouldn't kill these people if we can avoid it. Kira's like, nah, do it. Like, they're gonna kill us. Like, just
her eyes go kind of dead when she says that. It's them or us. Like, there's not enough Visitor's performance is really good. It's Kira. Like, and you're right. Like, Worf over the course of the next generation is like, Captain, we face something uncertain. Have you considered blowing it up these 3 different ways? No, and no, Wolf. Like, have you ever seen that compilation of Worf just getting shut down all throughout the next generation?
It's so reliable, like every single fucking time.
And it's usually something like, Captain, we need to fight. Like, it's usually something along those lines. But I don't know. Worf gets his moment where, earlier in the episode where they're like, well, what do we do? And they all turn to Worf, and he goes, we fight. So he has that moment. He's still got that. But yeah, you're right. At the end, Kira's like, look, I'm ready. Kid, let's blow this thing and go home. Like,
well, I think DS9 Worf is a massive improvement. That's all I'm going to say about that.
DS9 Worf is fun. Still got Shane and Sophia on the line. Is my internet fucking up?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Do we have Sophia?
Oh, good question.
I think we got a burb from Sophia. Okay, burb is the word.
Okay. So we can start wrapping this up.
Yeah, totally. Shane, any thoughts on the past things we were just saying?
Oh, on the stuff just here in this like climax.
Yeah,
it's cool. It's I had a lot more fun with this episode than I did with the TNG one before, because like what a difference production values and decent actors and budget make. It's and good writing. There's a lot of really great stuff here. Just in as you were talking about, like these subtle things that are done by the actors, really sells it. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, it's oh god. I mean, compared to the TNG episode, it's. I mean, the TNG episode, it was made in the 80s,
Yeah.
This is God, mid 90s by this point, or even dipping into the late 90s because it's season 4.
96.
Okay,
I guess
so mid.
Because I'm not so familiar with all the different sort of eras, right? Like, it all kind of blurs together in my mind, and I think the higher production values of the later series and episodes kind of transfer onto the earlier stuff, and it's kind of surprising to go back to it, just how kind of shoddy it is. Yeah,
it's pretty amazing.
I mean, season 1 of TNG is a particular example of this, because even with the remaster, when you go to the first episode of season 2, season 2 can still be kind of rough. Just the quality, the picture quality is like immediately better, right? And the show is aware of this so much so that at the beginning of season 2, there's kind of like a handheld movement, like point of view kind of movement through the hallway leading into the bridge, and the picture is just so much more nice and crisp. Anyway, if we're ready to continue,
Yeah, we're almost done.
We're almost done. Worf, back in the Defiant, they see that after Kira says that, they see that the Lakota has powered down their weapons, and then they get hailed. And so it cuts from there back to Cisco and Leighton, and they get a Google Hangouts call, and the secretary calls into Leighton's office and says, "Hey, there's a call from the Defiant for Captain Cisco." And Captain Cisco points the phaser at Leighton and says, "Put it through." And Leighton says, "Do as he says." And you know what? We didn't comment on this before, but a fun bit of business is that every time they take a call in this like hostage situation,
Yeah.
Cisco hides the phaser, even from the Defiant.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a good bit of business right there.
It's fun acting stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I think when Benteen first called, Cisco hid the phaser behind Leighton, actually, which is really interesting.
It's a perfect hiding place, really.
Yeah, it's still pointing at his back.
Hey, I just got my arm around my buddy, my chum.
Right.
You know?
But yeah, the Defiant says that the Lakota has powered down its weapons, and Cisco asks how many casualties. 24 casualties on the Lakota and 2 on the Defiant. And I think that's kind of when Leighton breaks, I feel like. He doesn't like express it immediately.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Well, that plants the seeds of that like this is the consequences of what he's trying to do, right? Like you can tell he just kind of buried that or suppressed that fear of Federation on Federation crime. Like and he still tries to hold on to it, right? Like, you know, what does he say? It doesn't matter. Oh yeah. So Leighton points out like, hey, you kind of fucked up, dude. If you took that call, security knows you're out of your cell and you're in here with me now. Cisco says it doesn't matter. Pretty soon the president will have all the evidence he needs. Odo's already talking to him. It's over. And Leighton really starts to break here and screams, "It's not over. I have enough loyal officers to make a fight of it."
It's not over.
It's not over. Yeah, exactly.
I love that delivery.
It was really good. He's a good actor too.
Yeah, it's a fun like serial villain delivery. Like
yeah,
not quite as hammy as where O'Brien goes or Colm Meaney goes, but you know, still kind of like he's got I don't know. It's got gravitas and bombast and all the good stuff.
What makes that line delivery work also is that Leighton has been so calculated and not even cold, right? Like he presents himself as a Starfleet doing what he thinks is best for the Federation.
It's like a simmering boil, you know, just like a sort of seething, like you know that he's intensely like Dr. Strangelove levels of paranoid. He's not like a cold, rational actor, but he is a calculating, rational actor.
Right. And so in response to what Leighton said, Cisco, says, "You're fighting the wrong war." Another fun delivery line. "Benteen has already turned on you, and she was closer to you than anyone. It's over."
Yeah, it's gotta hurt. It's gotta hurt.
Yeah.
Benteen wouldn't even kill 50 Starfleets for you. Now what, dude?
Right. And so he kind of realizes it is truly over at that point, and he's symbolically shows this by taking off his pips and says, "I hope you aren't making a grave mistake." Now, when I first heard that line, I was half expecting Cisco to say, "Me too," in that kind of tropey, dramatic way. And I think when I thought about it, I was like, no, but Cisco wouldn't say that. He knows he's doing the right thing.
Yeah, there's beyond a shadow of a doubt. Even if there is like a changeling threat, don't fucking put Earth under. It's martial law isn't enough for Leighton. You know, don't do that. Don't do what he wants to do there.
Right, and that's been kind of proven, like both by Grandpa Cisco and by a changeling himself. He was like, this isn't going to do anything. You realize that, right? And so, he puts down his pips, walks out of the office, presumably to go turn himself in. And it cuts back to Grandpa Cisco's restaurant, and we see the yellow shirts beaming off the streets. The 3 yellow shirts that constituted martial law.
Mm-hmm. All 3 of them.
All 3 of them.
The Troika. The triumvirate.
That's it. That was them.
That was the difference between utopia and martial law.
3 yellow shirts. So we have kind of like a resolution scene, and Odo's like huffing and puffing and rolling his eyes, and everyone's like, what's wrong, Odo? He's like, am I the only one who's worried about changelings still being on Earth? And here's where we get the show saying what Lexi just said. Like, if the changelings want to destroy Earth, they have to do it themselves. We're not going to do it for them. That was a really good line by Cisco.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that.
Strong.
I feel it. Yay, freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom's good, and you're not going to fix everything by eliminating it. And up your ass, Leighton. There is another line that I like. It's when the troopers are beaming out, and Grandpa Cisco's like, if they stayed, it wouldn't be Earth anymore, would it? It didn't seem right. Oh, those phasers everywhere. I mean, I could hear Sophia yelling at her television from Arizona.
I was yelling at my television from Arizona.
I heard it across the country.
There's polls.
Yeah. And, here's the thing. The show a little bit plays the whole, like, take your goddamn medicine, Dad thing as like a womp womp at the end, because he's like, is he always such a mother hen? No, it's like, oh, he means well. It's like, no, take your fucking medicine, Dad. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
It's not the strangest choice for a joke I've seen Star Trek do.
Yeah, there's much stranger. Will we watch Threshold? I don't know.
Oh, God.
Anyway, moving on.
Don't even get me started. But yeah, no, but
Threshold.
It's still a bizarre thing to make like, Grandpa, you are going to die. Take your medicine, you stupid old man. Like,
Yeah.
It's very relatable though. Like that's like kind of the whole thing.
Yeah, it is relatable, and it's cute. It is a cute exchange.
It is cute. Yeah, it's definitely like it can be played for comedy. So we get Cisco, Jake, and Jake offer to bring Grandpa Cisco to the Deep Space Nine, and Jake's like, you should open a restaurant. People would love it. And he's like, you should open it yourself. This is home. He's a very traditional man. We get 2 different captains in the 90s Trek with like very traditionalist families, which is always interesting. You got the French traditionalism of the Picards and the Creole traditionalism of Grandpa Cisco. But anyway.
The French national culture and its sort of colonial variants, very well represented.
Yes.
Oh my God, I never put that together. You're right. This is a very French. 90s Trek is very French in a subtle way.
Yeah, well,
we just missed the captain whose parent is like a Bohemian Parisian fuck.
Obviously, you've never met Janeway's family. They're all like, neo-situationists, like smoking like cyber hash.
Damn it, Dad! I joined Starfleet to get away from all this shit.
All this radical break from the societies before. I love separation of powers.
Oh my God. They all being away. Cisco opens up the restaurant and everything's kind of back to normal. So I want to, before we call it, I want to pivot to Shane.
Yeah.
And ask, what did you think? We picked these episodes for you and Puya to kind of show you what civilian government and civilian life is like under Star Trek. What do you think? Is it still utopian? Is it kind of sketch? We've been kind of dancing around these issues.
I think it's a little bit of both. I was really thrilled, that this episode kind of answered all of my questions from like the first episode of the show. Like what's civilian life like? What are the real structures of the society? I think I do agree with the general point that like this is much better than what we have now. It is utopian. I come away from this episode worried though about this society and how it will weather these kind of threats in the long run. If I'm right and what it's basically doing is this kind of like bourgeois democracy but cleaned up a little bit. I think that to create a sort of long-lasting, self-stabilizing, liberated society requires structural organizational change at a fundamental level that is ultimately incompatible with the state form. And that kind of keeping these vestiges of like nation state forms and military bureaucracies and so on just has this gravitational pull towards collapse and dictatorship, which they are still grappling with even in this semi-distant future, right? And it's kind of clear that like this is quite good. It's post scarcity. There's clearly the people are a lot happier than people tend to be today, you know, but. You know, it is also on screen that this is like unlikely to last if it doesn't like evolve in a way that can like preserve that liberty and stabilize itself in the face of these threats. You know.
Totally. So let's go around. Kyle, what did you think of these two-parters?
Yeah. So I obviously. Agree with what was said before about like the family being really good. I do still have a little bit of like, I don't know, sort of like lingering anti-family sentiments that express about the way that Jake is treated in terms of making food. I feel like it's like, you know, why would Jake put up with this shit? But you know, like
he doesn't. He goes to New Zealand.
Yeah, that's right. He manages to get away from it for the most part. And I can understand though the positive value of like, yeah, you know, having a good representation of a black family on TV in the 90s is like unusual, and it is a very good one. So I appreciate that. I would agree with Shane about the sort of problems about having a state in the Federation. Interestingly, I don't think we ever really get an episode about the sort of McNair critique of federalism in the Federation in Star Trek, right? Like we don't really get like you know, this planet in the Federation wants X, but the other planet in the Federation wants Y, and then, you know, some like mediators are brought in, and then how is Picard going to deal with that? I don't think we ever really get that. So that dimension of like the Federation that could be a problem, I don't think it gets a treatment. But I am interested to see where this goes going forward with like, you know, Section 31's been done a million times. Discovery Season 2 covers it and comes to some rather uncomfortable conclusions about it. So we'll have to talk about that at some point.
Yes.
But Picard, I suspect, is going to end up in exactly the same place that this episode did.
Me too.
I think that Star Trek is inherently incapable of thinking beyond the sort of broad skeleton of the American state, so I am not expecting much from Picard in the way of like coming back to this subject matter and coming up with a different answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so those are my thoughts on this episode. Overall, well acted. I like the character beats, and I think it's one of the better two-parters. So enjoyed it.
Lexi?
Yeah, as a two-parter, like I was like, oh my god, why didn't this like end a season? Well, it turned out they wanted to make this the season finale that would go into the other season, but they're like, nah, we don't want to do a cliffhanger. Let's not do that. Let's make it a mid-season cliffhanger. So this had, season ender all over it to me. It's like a big momentous story about utopian Earth. You really just don't get stuff like this in the 90s. And it has a lot of the requisite layers of darkness that you need to exist in the 90s. But basically operates within the utopian vision somehow. And yeah, the structural critiques of the Federation are true. This episode in particular went a long way to convincing me that the Federation isn't like communist in a Marxian sense, really. It's so much that it's inherently incapable of imagining stuff beyond some kind of constitutional republic. And Picard probably won't do much different. I would say that probably about the young upstart schools of political thought that are out there as well. Unfortunately, something that I keep returning to is that there's a sort of yearning for a higher form of freedom than the constitutional republics and their machinery that we know. But pretty much no one seems fundamentally able to answer the Federalist on a concrete level. And Star Trek represents this, that even in our sort of pop culture utopias, there's no there seems to be no alternative to the Federalist. And my adventure through radical politics leaves me a bit hungry, because I'm sort of open to the possibility of some kind of Hegelian historical production of a higher form of freedom where the state becomes unnecessary, and or that the state becomes radically democratic in a way that we can barely recognize, right? But a lot of the radical theory around this is quite wanting. The best proposals that, the communist movement seemed to make were the sort of very fleshed out councilist proposals from the 30s, where some councilist types wrote a big old program treatise, so they kind of felt like a true Soviet-based council-based government would be like. That wouldn't just collapse into the Leninist state. It's actually kind of a hard thing to answer, and we do have examples in culture, and in the culture series, I should say, around written around, I guess, in the 80s and that sort of thing, and that did a better job of imagining this on on a book utopia level, on just brainstorming. But yeah, as far as popular culture is a lot like radical theory, in that it doesn't really have any ideas beyond constitutional republic.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, something that Lexi said kind of made me think about how this is also, it's not really a Marxian form of communism, but when you think of the official left, and by official left, I don't mean the Democratic Party. I mean the different communist and social democratic parties throughout history, especially the history of the 20th century. They don't seem to break with this either, even if they are, Marxist, right? They all take for granted this kind of state form and just want to govern that state in essence. Even the ones that are supposedly revolutionary. So much so that eventually official communists kind of drop the pretense of revolutionary thought and are just communists in name only, Eurocommunism. And then on the flip side, as far as Marxian communists who want something more of that, the predominant voice that represents that are some form of left com or ultra left or even communizers. And to me, their response seems wanting, you know what I mean, from a strategic standpoint.
Yeah.
And that's a whole ball of wax that we can get into, but I feel deeply what Lexi was talking about, and that like this two-parter leaves me with more questions than answers, and more of a yearning than more of a yearning for something more meaningful rather than an idea of how to proceed or what I want to see in the future, you know? And you know, it's kind of a frustrating and kind of nihilist place to be. You know, I don't really feel like McNairism has all the answers either. And that seems to be the consensus among everybody involved with the reading series. Although we all like the book to varying degrees, it doesn't seem to have all the answers we want. And so, I don't know, like, with that said, like, if this is the best that humanity can achieve, it's still pretty good. And it's always constantly going to be under threat of, you know, takeover or coup or whatever, of the clenching, if you will. But it's still a million times better than what we have. And I'm sort of the opinion, even if we have a more Marxian fulfilled version of this in the future, you're still always going to have to be on the lookout for people who want to take that over and use that for their own gain. And I think the kind of system that Shane is proposing, that, you know, cybernetics kind of promises, might be a lot better at handling that than any other system, but that's still always going to be a threat, I think.
Totally.
And there's one thing that
even futurists in Star Trek are, you know, have trouble imagining what that would look like.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of wanted to pivot to something that Kyle was talking about with the family, and kind of like pulling that thread in a more direct way, or more getting at the more underlying issue, is that like the bourgeois family form still exists in the society, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
there's no even pretense of an addressing of that. And
yeah,
I
classical
think
gender exists.
classical gender exists.
Yeah, I would say like Discovery is trying to kind of push at the borders of that in terms of talking a lot about found family and all these different varieties of family, but it's quite unusual in Trek for doing so. Even if the bridge crew of any given Star Trek series is a kind of found family form, and that's like a core trope that Discovery's maybe pushing a bit further.
But I think as far as like the purpose of looking at this two-parter and looking at civilian life in the Federation, that's something that's incredibly wanting, especially as like a queer trans woman. I want something more than this, you know. And it's not like abolishing the bourgeois family form has not been theorized, but it feels like the theorization around it has always been wanting also, in a lot of ways. And I guess much like, you know, this working out the specifics of lower stage communism, working out the specifics of abolishing the bourgeois family form can lead to a lot of potential trappings and problems. So, you know, maybe we'll never really have that fully fleshed out, and it has to be something that kind of has to be done organically. I don't know. But I could say with certainty, I don't want this, even if the Ciscos are like a beautiful example of like a positive family.
Yeah,
there's a lot of interpersonal conflict that the Ciscos have that's portrayed here. But if this is like the best form of that, what is the more abusive form that still exists that wouldn't be portrayed on television in Star Trek?
Well, the thing to think about is that you have like entire this makes most sense in Starfleet, right? When you have families going along with the ships, like you have a kind of village on that ship. It's not that private. That there is a sense of privacy, and there is that patriarchal sense of ownership over children that is there. But like, if this ship existed in real life, and I think it's heavily suggested just by the environs, but not necessarily like by the plots. Like the plots don't really get into this. That there would be like a sense of collective bonding between like the children on the ship and the adults around on the ship. Like, I think that's like not ever stated, but is totally part of the vision, but a very quiet part of the vision. Like,
Yeah.
Totally true. I think one of the interesting things that I found out recently from reading stuff about a Star Trek role-playing game I want to DM at some point. When you watch the original series, Kirk's beginning monologue and the intro song talks about the 5-year mission, right? To explore the galaxy. When you get to TNG, it's just the ongoing mission. And looking at like the lore and stuff, it turns out that Galaxy-class starships, which is what the Enterprise is, are a relatively recent invention in TNG. And the original Enterprise from TOS is not a Galaxy-class ship. It's a Constitution-class. And what's one of the main differences between a Constitution-class and a Galaxy-class is the Galaxy-class is made to bring your families along. So that way you can have an ongoing mission and you're not separating Starfleets from their families indefinitely. Your families come along. And so it seems like that might be kind of an organic way to address the bourgeois family form in Star Trek. I don't think they ever really flesh it out, but it is an interesting thought experiment of like, can society of a Galaxy-class starship be replicated in Federation civilian territory where, you know, you have kind of like a village raising the children, you know?
Well, it's kind of moving in the direction of what they end up with in the culture, right? Infinite mobility, open sociality, all that kind of stuff. And it's an interesting thought. Like, obviously, we're not going to see that on Discovery because it takes place before TNG. And it's just not that big of a ship. But it was an interesting move that they made of TNG in that direction. And then we see that followed up on in some degree in DS9. And I guess, like, as far as, like, problems with the bourgeois family form, like, I think we get that in Voyager a bit with Paris and his dad. Isn't that right?
oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Cartman and his brother too.
Right.
Even Dr. Bashir, when you meet Dr. Bashir's parents, it's heavily suggested that Bashir had a troubled upbringing. Very much so. Like,
yeah, so you do see it a bit, but
like, and it's just never openly questioned, really.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It is not openly questioned. Even in Discovery, it's not openly questioned. It's just like, oh, hey, here's some other types of families, and like they hit that incredibly hard in season 2, as like beating you over the head with a big stick, saying, "This is the theme." So yeah.
Discovery 2, though, is that like it's coming out at a time when like the bourgeois family as it exists is entirely different.
Yes.
It's a kind of incorporation of gay marriage and non-traditional families. Like it's a very common theme, so it seems fitting that Discovery would incorporate that into its story also. But it's still, these are challenges from within the bourgeois family form that don't really challenge the fundamental assumptions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's modern family in space. I get it.
Right. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
How about we close out by picking what we're going to do next time?
Oh yeah, that's great.
I feel like we should just make this an ongoing bit where we talk about what we want to watch to next, since we're jumping around. So, my kind of feeling is that we're probably going to be spending a lot of time in Deep Space Nine because it has some of the most interesting politics, in my opinion. But I kind of want to go back to TNG and kind of develop the Cardassians in order to like set the stage for Deep Space Nine, and do a couple of the episodes on Cardassians, which have their own interesting politics themselves. And I can't remember the name of the episode, and I'm trying to find it in our list, but there is an episode where in TNG where O'Brien's former captain goes rogue and starts just like attacking Cardassians because he can't get over the war.
Right.
And that's when the Cardassians are first introduced, and the Cardassians are actually sympathetic in that episode. And it kind of deals with like space racism and all that kind of stuff.
The Cardis.
Yeah, the Cardis. Yeah. So I kind of want to do that, but what do y'all think?
Let's go around the horn. What do we want to see?
Yeah, I'm up for anything. Something cool and action packed, perhaps.
Yeah,
anything though.
I have only the vaguest recollections of that episode, having seen it in the 90s. So yeah, I could be into hanging out with racist O'Brien and his racist friends. See how that goes. Because I for what I remember, it's pretty extreme in TNG. And then it gets a little bit more moderated in DS9.
Totally correct. I don't know. There's like some. I think that episode does, to answer Shane's question about something action packed. I think that episode does the first like bleep bloop Pac-Man style, like this little triangle shoots this other triangle. So if that's what you mean by action packed Pac-Man battles.
Yeah, let me tell you.
Yeah, straight up my alley. Cool.
Yeah, I don't recall this being an especially action-packed episode.
Oh, I don't mind. It'll be fine.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think it'll be good to do like a one-parter, because two-parter was a lot of time spent on one theme.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. All right.
Second and third episode, like first episode setting up the utopianism, second episode setting up the utopianism found within the citizens and the civilian government, and now let's look at war and conflict and how that plays in utopia.
All right, all right, we got this.
So I think we should do that episode and then pivot to Ensign Row, which is not a two-parter. It's just kind of developing these themes and setting up the Bajorans.
So I see what you're doing here. You're doing Deep Space Nine, the prequel.
Pretty much.
All right. No, that's cool. Yeah, we can set that stuff up because the Maquis also cut into Voyager a little bit. So I mean, like, maybe that'll get us tipped into that. Because my instinct is like, let's just do like kind of fun, like, I don't know. I would like eventually do some wild cards from like Voyager and Enterprise or something.
Me too.
The one with the macrobacteria.
Oh my god!
That was great. That was some good TV.
That was pretty fucking best Sigourney Weaver impression that Catherine Janeway can do. But it's pretty great. It's a fun episode.
Here's the thing with that episode. I want Captain Janeway to squeeze my head with her biceps.
Okay.
I want this. Don't kink shame me. I want it.
I think that's a fine desire, and I share it.
This is where the family form goes.
Yeah.
Once you get into Starfleet.
But you know what? Voyager is the horniest '90s Trek. Like,
it
is.
So maybe by the I don't know, by some Freudian logic, it will like rhizome itself through just being horny. Right? That's how communism works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. There's another thing I want to bring up too, though. That's completely opposite of what I said, but
Yes.
we do have Picard coming up. So, is there something y'all would rather
Ooh.
watch to set up for Picard, or
I mean, I guess like I'm not really interested in doing the Borg episodes, the two-parter. I don't really want to do that. But if there's another episode in mind that's just like, yeah, this is who Picard is. Like this defines the character. I might be into that. Just because we get the contrast of Cisco, right?
that might be a good idea. I'm thinking the only issue is that I'm going through TNG the first time myself, and I'm in season 5, so I'm getting there.
Okay.
I've had a few things spoiled to me. I know the episode, the infamous "There Are Four Lights" episode, supposed to be like a big Picard development episode, but I don't know anything about it other than he says there are 4 lights. That's literally all I know about it.
All right. Well, then keep it that way.
It's the great liberal individual standing up to collectivism. It's a good performance. It's a good performance.
It is a great performance.
So here's my thought. Let's do the Cardassian stuff for now, and the Bajoran stuff. Deep Space Nine prequel.
Sure.
Yeah.
I do want to watch the Maquis myself before we do it for the show, but if I have to jump ahead, I'll do it.
Okay.
And
Cool.
Yeah,
Prequel it up. Sounds great.
sweet.
Wonderful.
So let's go off air. I don't know if we have had any comments. I guess not.
Yeah. No comments today. Quiet chat.
Let's go off air, and I want to talk some shop
Okay.
All right.
before we go our separate ways.
Good night. Live long and prosper.
Live long and
Bye.
prosper.
Night night.
We did it.
Oh yeah.
Aha, we did.
3 hours.
Woo!
We doubled